Okay, so we are here with what are we on? Four? Part four of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set review. This is going to be the longest one so far because we are covering all of the rares and mythics. I might break it up later. We'll see how it turns out. We'll go through this pretty fast. Um, this set is crazy for rares. I didn't realize how much of a difference the rares and mythics made here. Um, like usually I try and do commons and uncommons when I do the drafting portion of the set review, when I go through and talk about what's good or what's strong. Um, but the rares are impactful here simply because so many of them are playable. You're not going to get a lot of last pick. So we're going to go through the system that I use, a few of the shape of the format things, and then we'll get right into it. So I use the scuffle system. It is it usually says scuffle system at the top. But a 1 is a card that you never play. A 2 is a card that you try not to play. 3 is filler. 4 is a card that is above average. Don't worry about having a lot of 4s. 5 is strong. It is a strong card in that color. You are happy to have it. A 6 is a card you'll always play if you're in that color or in that situation. A 7 is a reason to be in that color or that archetype or that situation. 8 is a card that you need to make fit. 9 is a card you will always play. A 10 is a card that wins the game. They're very rare. The floor, I also grade on a floor to ceiling system. So that everything has a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 that we just talked about. Floor is the worst a card will be. Ceiling is the best a card can be. And then effort is the difficulty it takes to get from that floor to that ceiling. Whether that's because it's sideboard or situational or it only works in some decks. So we can go ahead and get started here. How do I sound okay? Does everything? All right. Just tell me if that changes. I forgot to update rid of 5. Last thing I need. Okay, so shape of the format and shape of the rares of this. This is a high work rare set. That means that a lot of the cards are build arounds, and a lot of the cards are situational, and a lot of the cards only go into certain decks. And that's awesome. We see that very rarely. And it's what it means is that if you are a merfolk deck, nobody else is going to be taking your merfolk card. You are a vampire deck, nobody else is going to be taking your vampire. You can plan a bit for your rares, or you can take a rare and try really hard to build around it. And you can even make assumptions about other people's decks based on the commons and uncommons you see in the early. For the purposes of this set review, I'm going to assume that any multicolor card you see is castable, that you are in that color combination. Usually it's more of a factor, but there's a lot of multicolored rares in this set. And there's some prohibitive mana cost. But in general, the rares in this set are answerable. That means that you can defeat them if you have the right card at the right time. Kind of a really good set. And the bombs, there's a few like real traditional bombs, very powerful cards. But the most of the bombs are value bombs. They are cards that grind enough value over time as you can build around them or do cool things with them. There's just a few notes about this set. All of the land removal is better than I thought at common and uncommon. So like there's an uncommon cave that destroys a non-basic land and you make a treasure and they get a basic land. That card is just better than I gave it a rating for before because there are really good lands that you kill, more so than usual. Also, some numbers that I'll be referring back to. In this set, there are 11 merfolk and cards that create merfolk. There are 14 vampires. There are 15 pirates. There are 31 dinosaurs. There are 22 strong activated abilities. That includes craft. That's a very good point, Tyrant. Lots of Braid is really good against a lot of. So we're going to start with white, go through each color, and I'll take a short break before multicolored. I'm also going to take a candy break to keep firing out. Sugar is good. I'm going to be talking a lot. Here we go. So first, Abuelo's Awakening. Really cool card. You can play this as a 4 mana X spell, which means that if you're paying 6 mana, like let's say you have an artifact in your graveyard that doesn't do anything, like an equipment, because you can't equip it anymore. Can pay 6 mana for a 3. That's not great. I gave it a floor of 2, but it's usually going to play a little closer to that ceiling of a 4 because there are a lot of really cool cards that you can pair with Abuelo's Awakening. even at common. So like you can play like there's a boulder with cycling. You pay 2 mana to cycle the boulder, put it in your graveyard, Abuela's Awakening back. Well, you just saved 2 mana, you get to kill a creature, and you have a 1/1 flyer out of it, which is a little easier to work with. Um, the body does end up being rough often enough that I'm okay playing with the Awakening. Cool card. Um, but there are some crazy rares and some crazy craft cards that you can also pick up with it. If you transform a card, it stops being a spirit. Like if you pay 4 to pick up a craft card, and strong enters the battlefield ability, and then transform it, it doesn't matter that it's a fragile 1/1 spirit anymore. But there, because of craft, there's a lot more enter the battlefield effects on enchantments and art. So like this card is some work, you got to build around it a bit, but there's real reanimation strategy. And it's cool that they put in an artifact and enchantment reanimation. 1/1 flying boulder ranger, that is right. Yep. All right, Fabrication Foundry. Card is a lot of work. There are 35 artifacts in this set, and there's a lot of ETBs, so it's not impossible to make work, but like you have to be getting good value out of both of the mana ability and the exile an artifact to return another artifact ability. So like play this in white black with the artifact that makes your opponent sacrifice creatures, or white blue with the artifact that makes you draw cards. But it's very difficult to make the amount of work it takes worth it if you are turning your like if you have a 3 of the blades that your opponent sacrifices a creature and you're just turning them into each other, that's pretty cool. But it's more work than is worth. So like I'm not gonna first pick the Fabrication Foundry and try to make it work, but there are black white or blue white decks where I will pick it up late and be not too upset about it. There's not You don't get a lot out of the ramp from it. Most of the cards that cost 4 mana, and our artifacts don't interact well with the fact that like one of them puts 3+1 counters among your creatures. It's hard to already have creatures in play using the Fabrication Foundry to play that turn. So yeah, really cool engine piece, not very strong. If this were a Sack Tyrant, this card would immediately get a lot better because you could swap 2 artifacts back. But it's not totally unplayable, it's just really hard to play. Oh, and one thing I forgot to address at the beginning, the cards are generally going to have, so the rares in the set have a much larger gap between the floor and the ceiling than I think any other set I've reviewed. Because they all are a little bit more work, which is a great way to do rare. So it's just, we have a few weaker ones to start. That's just coincidence. Item next, Get Lost. I've said it a few times that removal is not great in this format. You need removal, you need to kill some things, but you don't need that much of it, and you're usually better deploying a threat or developing your... So giving your opponent 2 maps is a huge cost. One thing you may have noticed at your pre-releases this weekend is that you were creating attacks with 1 power. You were moving your equipment over, or using a map token to make 1 creature explode in order to create an attack all the time. Because those minute differences in size between creatures matter a lot. So, like we've seen this kind of effect before, like destroy target creature your opponent investigates, or destroy target creature your opponent draws a card. This one you'll play sometimes, but you will be upset when you play it. Oh, as an aside, the number of times you are disappointed to hit a land off of your map token is indicative of how good that extra point of power is. But it's the reason Get Lost is not totally unplayable is there are decks that want to play this as sacrifice a creature, make 2 maps. So if you have a deck that says that once actively sacrifice a map, make 2 maps, sacrifice a creature, make 2 maps, sacrifice a permanent, make 2 artifacts, then this card becomes not strong but playable because you'll hit your own permanent some amount of the time and you'll deal with a major threat from your opponent some amount. It's also not a terrible sideboard card, but like if your opponent is aggressive, you don't want to give them 2 additional power, and if your opponent is controlling, you don't want to give them 2 additional lands. If your opponent is between aggressive and controlling, you don't want to give them a card and a power. Yep, exactly, Tyrant. The maps are very powerful because every point matters. Making your creatures explore is powerful. Every point matters. Kellen, Daring Traveler, really cool card. I love this guy. Because so he's from the Omen Paths from Eldraine, and he's the only card with an adventure in the set. But it's relevant because so that 5 on the floor is if this is a 2/3 that scries 1 on attack, or a 2/3 that it draws a card maybe 1 in 3 times. You can set it up a bit with maps to make it hit a little more often. But like just a very efficient 2-mana 2/3. If you are green and white, you can assume that this will generate 2 maps. So whether this is a 2-mana 2/3 that draws a card 33% of the time, scries the rest of the time, or a 3-mana 2/3 that makes 2 maps, you're very happy to be playing. Just a very good green-white card. Like the thing is, Tyrant, the fail case here, is still really good. Like putting turn 1 making 2 maps is great. White really wants to make maps. It's a little bit like it's like Imidane's Recruiter in terms of value, but not in terms of pressure. But it's 2 less mana on both halves. So if you can splash the green, this is a white card, but if you can get the maps, you're very happy. It's just a very efficient, strong 2-drop. But it's not Thane, because it's not a good answer to the really big creatures of the format, because if your opponent has played a Colossal Dreadmom and then drawn 3 cards with it, and then you get it lost and they make 2 maps, you're going to lose that game. Unless this is the difference, unless this is you killing a final creature to attack for lethal, you're going to lose the game when you give the card that drew 2 cards. Yeah, like the thing is, like, it's a lot of factors coming together on Kellen Tyrant. Because 2-mana 2/3 that scries on attack, that's a good card. You play that. That's a 4. A 2-mana 2/3 that draws a card once, that's a 5 or a 6. 3-mana 2/3 that explores twice, that's a 7. Like, it's just very efficient across the board, and it really helps you get to where you need to be. All right, up next, Kutsul's Flanker. This one is very efficient. All 3 modes are great. So a 3-mana 3/1 that deals 3 damage. Like, if you play this as an attacker, great. You can play it on your opponent's end step, untap, grow your creatures. You can make it huge. There are sweepers that are worth playing around, where you can make a big combat happen and make it really big. If you're playing this as a 3/1 with flash that gains 2 life and scries 2, then are pretty happy still. Scry isn't quite a whole card. The gain life is relevant. The scry 2 is relevant. And exiling someone's graveyard is really good in this form. I'm actually lowering the floor, but the ceiling and the rating are going to be the same. All right, up next we've got Ogier Tak, Foundation. So I gave this a rating as a 6-mana 6/6 that dies into a land. This is not an easy card to transform back from a land into a creature. If it tripled all tokens, you'd be really happy, but it's some work to get a tokens deck together. And it's some work to play your tokens after Ogier Tak. Because, like, let's say you have a good Tinker's Tote deck, or a deck that has a whole bunch of just if your deck has creatures that come into play and make token creatures, you're going to have to cast them before Ogier Tak in this. But a 6-mana 6/6 with vigilance and upside is good enough. It's a cool card. Without being like, it's not crazy strong. I actually had one in my pre-release deck over the weekend, and I ended up, well, not in my 2-headed giant pre-release, and I ended up cutting it because I just never had time to get to a 6-mana 6/6. And compared to the other gods, so all of the gods die and transform into a land, which means that in the worst case scenario, all of the gods die into a card that is irrelevant that you, and then the lands can sometimes turn back. It's not free to turn it back. Like, you'll probably have to sacrifice a creature, unless that attack is winning the game. However, compared to the other gods, this one you don't get as much out of the land. I gave this a floor of a 3. It's gonna play a lot closer to a Colossal Dreadmaw than you would think. Like, if I'm green-white, there's a very good chance I'm taking Colossal Dreadmom over taking the 6-mana 6/6 that draws you a card for each dinosaur you. which it's still a good card. Like I gave it a 5, and it's usually going to play like a 5. You want to have a few cards that make tokens. You can build around it. Like if you play an Ogier Talk turn 6 and then turn 7 play 2 Tinker's Totes, you're going to win that game. Also, there are specifically 2 token making artifacts that come down before Ogier Talk and transform into things that make more tokens. So there's the Stone-Fired Bricks, that one goes to get you a Plains, and then it's 7 mana to turn into an artifact that comes with 2 gnomes. And then there's the Golem Factory, that 7 mana crafts into Golem Factory and makes golems as long as an artifact came into play. So the curve of Ogier Talk into one of your craft things, the real game-ending threat. Why it's got medium effort instead of high effort. But it's better in white-blue, surprisingly enough, than green-white or red-white. Just a cool card. I like it, but it's not great. Resplendent Angel. So this card is good because it self-enables. I gave it a 5, and it's usually going to play at that floor of a 5. That floor of a 5 is a 3-mana 3/3 flyer that pays 6 mana to win the game. Because once you make that first Angel, you're probably winning the game. Once you get to 6 mana, your opponent can't really block. But white 3 is very difficult to produce in this form. So like compared to other, it's not that the format is fast, it's that you don't have 6 mana to spend. You are creating lasting value with your 6 mana activated ability. I mean, a 5 is good. Like it's always going to play at least a 5. 3-mana 3/3 flyer would be a 4. A 3-mana 3/3 that gains lifelink and starts generating angels does win the game. But it's fragile enough that they'll probably kill it before it gets to that point. And it's dangerous enough to activate that if you pay 6 mana to take your whole turn trying to generate that angel and your opponent embraces it, you'll... So there is some gameplay difficulty. When you have Resplendent Angel, you probably don't want to spend your turn activating it as opposed to playing something else, which is not what you want. But it'll do its work. There are ways to gain life in increments of 5, but not very many, and mostly at rare. Like if you can do like Tinker's Tote lifelink, or there's a 2-mana 2/2 that descends 4. If you have descend 4, it's a 3 with lifelink, and you can give that +2/+2. Then the card gets a lot better, but it's work. So like you can take it high, but don't pick it. Don't move into white. Here's a card that I'm happy to splash though. Sanguine Evangelist, 3 mana 2/1 that makes a bat. That's 3 mana for a 3/2 worth of stats that dies into a bat. So that's 3 mana for a 4/3 worth of stats. But wait, there's more. If it just died into a bat, it would be a great card for the sack deck and a great card for the go wide deck. The Battle Cry makes green white care about it because you need bigger. There's also not a lot. So like most of the cards that pump your team, and you really want to pump your team, there's a lot of good tokens in this. Do so at quite a cost, like it's a whole card. The Evangelist just does it. And we'll take a look at a few other cards that either are payoffs or enable going wide with a large army, and they get a bump on their own. So the Evangelist kind of does it all, and you'll be okay splashing it. It's a lot of value for 3. Thousand Moon Smithy. This card is awesome. I got to play with it over the proof. Your worst case scenario is a 4 mana 2/2 that grows over time. If that's what you're doing, you have lost that game on. If you played a 2-drop or a 3-drop, then you got a 4 mana 3 that grows over time. There's a lot of text on this card. So, in order to just parse it down a bit, it is a 4 mana artifact that makes a Regal Bunnicorn. Makes a creature that grows with the number of artifacts and creatures you have. And then you can tap 5 artifacts or creatures to transform it at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase. So like the timing is important. You don't get to just do it at instant speed on your opponent's end step. You have to take a turn off of both attacking and blocking in order to flip this, unless you are building to make it happen, which means that you have cards like Tinker's Tote around. So Tinker's Tote lets you, Tinker's Tote and this card lets you flip it in the same turn. The better play pattern is this doesn't exile and come back tapped, and it doesn't tap and then transform. You can tap it to transform itself, but what you want to do with the Thousand Moon is flip it with 5 other creatures. And then the land on the back, when you cast a spell using this mana, makes another one of these Bunicorns. It grows like crazy. So you want to try and flip it with mana up and leave up the Barracks of the Thousand so that you can then make another gnome to block. Then you get to untap it and you start attacking. You'll make another gnome that turn, and then you'll have 3/8 gnomes and what it's supposed to do. It is worth noting, and unlike every card in the set that transforms into a non-basic land on the back, this one transforms into an artifact land. It's not a cave, it's an artifact, which means if you are looking at this on your opponent's side of the field, you have a destroy target artifact card, you can kill it. Pay attention, you want to be able to kill it. It's an artifact, I assume, just so that it keeps growing the gnomes that it makes, but yes, this is slightly more fragile once it flips than the others, so it is not a game over when your opponent flips it. This is a great card. Yeah, I think Tote may end up being one of the better commons in the set, Tyrant, just after looking at all the rares, because it played so well with all the commons and uncommons, but it plays really well with the rares too. Like, Tote is a card that I'm likely going to bump up after reading all the rares. All right, next, Unstable Glyph Bridge. So this is just a hell of a sweeper. You get to choose the card that's left, so like your opponent gets to keep a gnome or something relevant. I got to win a game of Two-Headed Giant by using the 2-mana 1/2s to put counters on all of my opponent's creatures, and then played this so that none of my opponent's creatures lived. So if your opponent has no creatures that meet the power 2 or less exception, you get to destroy them all. So the reason that this card is so powerful is that it is a sweeper, it stabilizes the board, and a threat in one card. The text on the Sand Swirl Wanderglyph is your opponent has to either choose each turn between casting a spell or attacking you. It's actually easier to get around than you'd think. Like, it's certainly annoying. I had an opponent play this against me in Two-Headed Giant, and it says, can't attack you, which means you can still attack their partner, Two-Headed Giant. But the threat of a 5-power flyer on the same card that just wiped the board is very good. It's pretty difficult for your opponent to keep a relevant card after this. Like, if you're at exactly 1 life and have no creatures in play, probably losing that game anyway. But the Glyph Bridge does a lot towards winning games that were otherwise going to be lost. All right, Warden of the Inner Sky. This one is a little more restrictive than some of the other rares, but it is only 1 mana, so you usually play it in white. Generally, a 1 mana 1/2 is going to be okay, and you're going to eventually get the chance to grow it. I really like these 1 mana threats that grow over time, and this one also jumps. So like, what this does that I like is the board stalls out in this. You will have, like, there's lots of situations where neither of you can make a good attack, or you're plinking in for a few points at a time, and you have to assemble your engine to grind value. I like Warden of the Inner Sky because scrying helps you dig to what you need to do in a board stall. And the flying is very relevant. Like, flying lets you break the boards. So like, you can tap a bunch of creatures and just keep attacking with it. You can also, you'll have situations where there's a big stalled out board, but you have 8 gnomes that are not good at attacking. You can tap enough gnomes to give it flying that turn. It's more work than some of the others, and it doesn't go into every deck. So I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3. That it's usually going to be worth cramming into your white deck. It's just not always worth picking. Foxy, hey, good to see ya. Good timing. We're just taking a moment. I'm going to eat a gummy because a little sugar goes a long way towards keeping my voice from giving out. Sorry, wrestling. How you doing tonight? I got these Sweet Tarts soft and chewy ropes. And I bought them because on the front it says, colors from real sources. Like, why? How? Why would you do that? Why doesn't everything say that, first of all? Yeah, so the reason that I like this one is it really is. Oh, let's get started on blue. So the blue rares in this set are less board impactful, but consistently value machines. So a call Pakal, also what a name. First among equals is a great example of that. So the reason a call has a 5, the floor of that of 4, like if you're not a dedicated artifact deck, it is still going to be a 1/5 for 3. Being a 1/5 for 3 is just pretty good in this format. It blocks most stuff and it can't be abraded, which is what you value out of your 3-drop. But being a strong blocker that generates value is good enough. Yes, it is hard. Like, most often this will be a 3-mana 1/5 that draws you a couple cards. And sometimes it's just going to create so much value that your opponent can't do anything. It also triggers Descend, and it triggers it on your opponent's turn. So if you're triggering it on your opponent's turn and on your turn because you have some flash artifacts, then this will probably win you the game just on pure card advantage. So like, you can think of this as a divination that blocks really, really well and enables your Descend. Which, surprising theme among divinations for Lost Caverns of Vixen. Yeah, I gave it a 5. I think it's just really pretty good, but not a bomb the way some other cards are, but it will draw you a lot of cards. All right. Braided Net and Braided Kipu. I think that's how you say it. Kipu? Or is it Quipu? I think it's Kipu. Somebody knows, tell me. So solid card, being able to there's a lot of niche value. Like, it taps any non-land permanent, which is nice to enable some attacks. There's a lot of value in tapping down like craft cards or planeswalkers in the activated abilities can't be activated text. And then it crafts into some card draw for only 2 mana. This card is cool. It's a little difficult to play with. You really want to be mid-range with it, like, or aggressive. So like, it looks like it should be a control card because it keeps you alive for a while and then draws a bunch of cards. It's just very hard to be stable enough to activate the keeper. You don't have to put this into an artifact deck. You don't need to draw 20 cards with a Kipu and tuck it back. Just like 3 cards is plenty, because it does count itself. But 2 other artifacts with the Kipu is great. The reason that, so like, this is 6 mana to reset, and then you can draw it again later. But like, you just have really good things to be doing with blue with 6 mana. So you need to make sure that you're getting value out of the initial taps by attacking or enabling attacks. But tapping 3 things is great. I like this one a lot. Just give yourself the time it takes. It takes a long time to get the full value out of this card. So you need to either get there with the first half of the Braided Net. Like, you need to get enough value out of the Braided Net to be running it. Or have enough time to get all the value out of the Braided Keep. But it is a lot of cards. Very cool one. I like this as a craft card. All right, Deep-Root Pilgrimage. So I gave this one a floor of a 1 with a ceiling of a 7. If you have the Merfolk to make this work, take it. And if you take it, pick one, grab the Merfolk to make it work. The Merfolk you need for Deep-Root Pilgrimage are the 1 mana 1/1s that explore and the 2 mana 1/2s that explore. You need to get the early attackers because you need to be making Merfolk the turn this comes down. And then you need to try and get, so there's a 3 mana 2/2 that makes a map token. That one is also very good with the because that one flies and it keeps making chump blockers. Hexproof on a 1/1 token is really nice. This will take over the game in a Merfolk deck, but you need to make sure you have a lot of Merfolk. So I'll be taking this early and trying to make it work in the Explore deck really happily. Also, the 1/1s with Hexproof make pretty good wielders of the maps of exploring. So there's 11 Merfolk in this set, but 2 of them have Vigilance. So you got to have other ways to craft them, to tap them. But one nice thing about this is, like, if you can get a vehicle, there's some really good vehicles in the set. It combos with that because now you get to start making Merfolk without having to tap them. So this does, I'm going to actually raise this because I went back and looked at all the Merfolk again, and it really is just, they're good. You just have to get them. Most of the really good merfolk are uncommon or rare. Cool card though. I'm excited to play it in constructed, and I might try it out in standard. Up next, Kitesail Larcenist. Just very efficient. It's usually going to play near that ceiling of a 7, so I gave it a 7. But a 3 mana 2/3 with flying and ward 1 is almost good enough. But the fact that it also effectively kills an artifact or creature, like it Fiend Hunters it, as long as it's in play, is so good. And like, you can sacrifice. So like, I watched people at the pre-release play this to turn one of their creatures that wasn't an artifact into an artifact because they needed one more to craft. I've watched people grab something to craft. I've watched people grab a disabled creature, the Petrify, in order to tap. They used the Larcenist to make another artifact because they had 2 flipped trapped saw blades. So this crewed one and created a treasure that they could use to crew the other one. There's a lot of niche value in turning your own cards into treasures, and it's a pirate. Like Ward 1 makes it a little hard to deal with, just very efficient. Good reason to be pirates and a good reason to be blue. Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, just very efficient. 2 mana flash flyer. It is a pirate. It is a cheap flyer. It is a flyer you can hold up to with a counter spell, and then if your opponent doesn't play anything with counter, you can drop him. Chances are you'll get to loot with him once. It is very, like, if you have attacked for 8 in the air with Malcolm, then you are in really good shape that game anyway. But like, the ability is mostly gravy, but it's good gravy. I like this one. Also, look at him. He's beautiful. Like, I love that he's descending on the sirens, just out sirening them. All right. Ogier Pack Patique Fist Echo. So I basically rated this one as a 4 mana 4/3 flyer that turns into a. It takes a really long time to get the land to turn back into Ogier. It's what, 4 turns minimum? 3 times, yeah, 4 turns, because you have to use it 3 times and then flip it back. But like, that's nice. What's cooler about Ogier is that he flips into a land that you can then use for mana. Like, he's at 4 mana 4/3, and if your opponent kills it, then you get a land out of it. That's awesome. In other sets, the instant spell gaining rebound would be much better. But I don't think there are any. We're gonna do a quick search. So type. So even the things you're doing at instant speed in this set tend to be artifacts with flash. Type in color Luke. So all of them are counter spells. Think literally. So Confounding Riddle works, but like, you're not gonna. It's 1, 2 counter spells, 1 Confounding Riddle, Unlucky Drop. I guess there's a reason to play Unlucky Drop, but like, you don't want to rebound Unlucky Drop, Relics War, or Relics Roar, or Brackish Blunder. You don't want to play these cards anyway. So there are only 6 cards in the whole set in blue that it works with. If you're blue-red and you have 4 Braids, then you can get to that ceiling of an 8. Or if you're blue-red and you have a bunch of, like, there are instants in other colors that are worth giving to rebound to. But they're tough to get going. So just treat it as a very strong flyer that gives you some value when it dies. Like, I would play a 4 mana 4/3 that died into a treasure, right? That's how it's going to play a lot of time. And it comes back eventually. It's a really cool card. But you can get it up to that ceiling of an 8 with good instants. Subterranean Schooner. Just ruthlessly efficient. You're always going to be able to crew this on turn 3, hope. But like, attacking with the 2 mana 3/4 and getting card selection that early, getting early card selection on a beater of this size is great, but you kind of want to be like, you want this a little early. If you get it too late, it's still an effective threat and it's still a reasonable body. And I like that it grows whatever is writing it, whatever you. Generally, so like, if this were in another set that didn't care about artifacts, it would probably have a lower rating. But the fact that this is a 2 mana artifact that is also a relevant body that grinds value is so good. You really want this to be the artifact set. But I love this card. But you want it in artifacts, you want it in explore. Want it in yeah. Yep. Got distracted by candy. So I do have a soft spot for this card because if you missed it, then during early access in the very first draft match, I held the dubious honor of being the first person to transform this and being the first person to use the Millennium Calendar. Um, and very happy about that. But so this one took some work to analyze. So you can pretty much ignore the back of it. Like the craft of it is not very relevant. If you happen to get something with a cool activated ability, great. Um, like it is an effective way to reanimate it. But if you can make this card into Soul Ring, it's going to do well for you. And in this set, you can make this card into Soul. There are good activated abilities. Just ramping to your craft, like you need to be ramping into 8 to 10 cards with, but you can build your deck so that you have 8 to 10 cards where the mana is relevant. Um, there are a few gods where like using the land is nice. There are land abilities, there are artifact abilities, there are craft abilities. This card makes all of those a little bit better, but needed to be you need to you need it to also be better than drawing a land late in the game. So like you need to also be you need to also care that this is an so it's part of an artifact activated ability deck. It's very hard to play with. But you can make it work. I should probably drop the rating, but I'm gonna leave it. The Ever Flowing Well, just really good. So your worst case scenario with this card is Divination. Divination would probably be a 3. So that's 3 mana, draw 2 cards. But in this set, being an artifact is of a card. Being a milling yourself 2 for Descent is worth a bit of a card. So I'd say this is a close to a 3 for 1. If it rather than a 2 for 1 in the right deck. But like you can make it into a 3 for 1 pretty easily. The back of it is nice. The ability on it is not horribly, but there are corner cases where it's really fun. Because like a lot of the really cool spells you can copy would already be winning you the game. A lot of the really medium spells you can copy are legendary, but still cool. Like I randomly got a I just upgraded a gnome once. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm happy with this. Like 2 extra damage. Um, this is a 3 mana 3 for 1 with some work. Deshaun's Tidebinder. So I like this card as one of the very few ways to effectively counter craft. So if your opponent puts 7 mana into crafting something, so some cards just get turned off by this. Like if your opponent has the Saheeli's Lattice and they exile 6 dinosaurs from their graveyard, and you counter this, well, exiling those dinosaurs was a cost. They don't get those dinosaurs back. So it effectively turns that card off forever, even if they deal with it. The reason this is a 5 is that a 3 mana 3/2 with flash, even without countering an ability, is still pretty good. But countering a good, there are enough rares that this I'm very happy to play. It doesn't answer a ton of commons or uncommons, but it answers so many rare transformations and powerful effects that I'm pretty happy with it. Oh yeah, there's some really good things to be turning off with it. I love this card. This card makes me want to play Merfolk and Pioneer. Like just countering target Planeswalker. A lot of formats. Maybe this is enough in modern. All right, we're taking a 30-second break while I eat this. Going to the black cards. Oh, I'm so sorry, Tyrant. I had a lot of fun in the pre-release. Every game was cool. Even the ones where I lost, that's how you know it's a good format. Yeah. Like, not decks were interesting. The rares were cool. Played really well. Right. So, like, in my pre-release Tyrant, I had one game where well, I'll tell you the story later. Then I don't want to complain during the second. But then I had one game that I lost. So the one match I lost in the singles, the guy fought so hard for it. He blew me out with 20 damage in one turn, and I'll show you how very shortly. All right, so our first black rare is a doozy. This is the Black God. It is not just a god, it is a bat god. Okay, Ranger. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but this is accurate. This Dream Trawler, this is reverse Dream Trawler. That's really funny, Tyrant. I got to hit somebody for, I used the Gnome Factory to hit somebody for 20 through 11 blockers with 14 attackers. So much fun. Yes, this card is really, really powerful. And it isn't, I mean, it looks powerful at a glance, but I gave it a very high rating. I think I have like 3 8s in all of Eldraine. But being a 5 mana 4/4 with flying and lifelink stabilizes you. You are now stable. Congratulations. If they were attacking you, they can't do that anymore. You'll gain 4 life. If they allow you to attack, well, that's fine. You get to hit them and gain some life. What are they going to do? Crack back? And you always get a card when they attack. Either they have to discard a real card, they have to discard a land card and give you a bat, which is nice because a lot of times your opponent will be exploring a lot and they'll have extra hands. Or you draw a card. Then it comes back as a land, which you have control over when it transforms. So, like, you bring it back as a land, you get yourself down to 1 card, and transform it back into the Aklatop. I think this is the best god. Right. Back. Yes, this is the best god in this set. Very strong one. It's always going to play pretty well. Like, your opponent can answer it, which I like. I like when the big bombs are answerable. Makes for a good format. Exactly. Yes. And we'll talk about that, Tyrant. We'll talk about that one soon. All right, Bloodletter of Aclazotz. Bloodletter of Aclazotz. Very, very good if you can pay triple black. Otherwise, it doesn't trade that, like, this looks like it should be a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. It is not always going to be a 4 mana 4/4 flyer because your opponent can block with 2 and 3/3s. And there are a lot of, it is not that hard for your opponent to get to a 3/3. But it's very efficient. I might be lowering this. Yeah, I like that better. Card's just fine, but like, it does snowball out of control. So if you are an aggressive bait, the problem is this deck really wants you to be aggressive, and the black decks are not that aggressive. But if you curve out into this 2-drop, 3-drop Bloodletter of Aclazotz, and your opponent suddenly is taking double damage, then you'll win the game. You can also play it in an aggressive black-red build. Black-red can be very grindy or very aggressive, and you're going to pick one. But if you play it in an aggressive black-red build with enough treasures, you'll still be able to cast this on curve, aggro them out. But it's a little more work than some of the other rares we've seen. It is Ranger, but it's not impossible. Like, this is a tough card for blue-black, but black-green and black-red can both out too. There's just a lot of treasures. Bringer of the Last Gift. So the first time I read this card, I'm like, oh my god. We have a Reanimator card that is worth reanimating. We have a Reanimator card that is worth building around. We'll descend 20 and then reanimate the Bringer and win. But nope, it's only if you cast it, and I'm mad. Card should be good. We should be allowed to reanimate this. We can't. Thing is, if you're paying 8 mana for a 6/6, you are like, there's a few different scenarios. Either you're a control deck and you have just spent the game countering your opponent's creatures and killing your opponent's. You play as on 8 mana and they get them back, or you are trading your creatures off and ahead on board, and you'll have to sack all your creatures. Like, the only way to make this card work is with significant graveyard interaction. You have enough ways to exile your opponent's graveyard, and this card gets worth it. But there's not enough ways to do that for, like, they're all rares. But if you have enough of the like 2-mana 2/1 that discovers 4 when it dies, that can exile 3 cards, and the land that exiles 3 cards, then this card gets playable. Still not great. Like, if you can get 2 creatures back without giving your opponent any, but that's difficult. It is nice for breaking open a board stall if you stall your opponent's graveyard. So I don't want to give it a totally unplayable grade, but you really don't want it. There's no Cycler's Tyrant. There's literally 0 creatures with cycling in the set. That's really funny, Ranger. I hadn't thought of that. That is true. Yes, there are. I forgot about those, Mega. Completely. Yes, there are 5 basic land cycles, and you can make it work. But like, if you're, I would rather just use Defossilizes and the Soul Coil Viper. I'm just mad that this card can't be reanimated. Like, this card wants to be in a reanimation shell. It can't function with reanimate. It's I gave it a 2 with a 4 of a 2. You're usually gonna play like that too. You'll have situations where this wins you the game. Usually, Corpse of the Lost. Just a very powerful value piece for black. 2 mana, 3/2 with haste. That's pretty close to good enough on its own. If this were just 1 3 mana, 3/2 with haste, be happy. And then if you're a deck that descends, you get to pick it up every once in a while. So like, that ceiling of a 7, that's if you're picking it up, and casting it every single turn. You can build a deck that does that pretty easily. That floor of a 5, that's if you make a 3/2 and you just leave it out for a while and pick it up every once in a while. It's kind of cool because like, you can have a 3/2 blocker, eat a 3/2 blocker, then you don't have to pick it up. There's not, I don't think there are any other skeletons, but overall this card's like very efficient piece of value. Is nice because in a lot of the rares and cards in this set, you have to decide whether that card is going to be a piece of value or an aggressive threat. This is one of the few value engines that can be. Up next, we have Preacher of the Schism. It's very possible that these 2 ranks. That comes down to how good the removal is. This card cannot be removed the way that this one can. But this one is better on its face. So 3 mana 2/4 Death Touch. If that were all it was, this would be a good enough body. But it always does something when you attack. When you attack while you're ahead, you get a 1/1 lifelinker. That's great on your 3 mana 2/4 Death Touch. If it attacks while you're behind, if it attacks while you're behind, you get a 1/1 lifelinker. If it attacks while you're ahead, you draw a card and lose a life. So it has a built-in method for doing whatever you need it to do. Unless you're both at 20. Then it does both. Card's really good. It's also a vampire. So the crafter I did look at, but it's tough to get with both. However, it is relevant. The craft mythic is relevant, or the craft uncommon is very relevant for this. Because you can play it out, leave it in play, and then get a 6/4. The haste is more important. It is, and you only get it once, Mega, but it's still cool. This card just kind of does everything you need. Also, cheap lifelinkers are very valuable. A lot of reasons that we'll look at when we get to the black-white multicolor. Queensbay Paladin. I had to do this one a few times. So there's 13 vampires in this set, but there's not a lot of vampires that are easy to reanimate. The vampires you want to reanimate are mostly rare, and then this card gets amazing. Like, if you're picking up a Preacher of the Schism with your Queensbay Paladin, you're going to win the game. Like, it's just fantastic. The problem is getting the vampires that you want is difficult. Most of the vampires that you want to reanimate are rare or uncommon. If you have them, then great. It is worth the effort. if you want to grab this first and then pick them up aggressively, it is great. It is difficult to get enough vampires to make this card strong. There are 13 vampires in this set compared to like 13 merfolk or a lot of dinosaurs, but most of them are rare and uncommon. Not a lot you can do. Vampires, pretty cool. Yeah, no, you're right, Banga. Like, as long as your life total is equal for the Preacher, you get both. I love that. So Queen's Bay Paladin is really good if you have other vampires. You don't even need a lot of vampires. The more vampires you go, the higher the rating. The more vampires you have that are strong, the higher the rating on the Queen's Bay Paladin. You have to be a little careful. Like, I saw someone at the pre-release in the two-headed giant lose a game because they Queen's Bay Paladin into a Queen's Bay Paladin into the 4-mana vampire. It's like, then they lost because they paid 9 life for that. So just keep track of your life total. It's pretty cool. I gave it a similar rating to the Merfolk tribal deck, but this one is a better body without any other vampire. Souls of the Lost. So floor of 2, ceiling of 6, medium of effort turns into a 4. This discarding a card or sacrificing a permanent is a real cost. But black-white has permanents you can pick up for it. Blue-black wants to send, black-green wants to send. Like, this is a good descent card. It is not necessarily a color-specific descent card, but you need to make sure you're descending to play with this card. Like, red-black wants to descend, but they're not good at putting a bunch of permanents into their graveyard quickly. They tend to put permanents into their graveyard slowly, one at a time. Souls of the Lost is not great there as a payoff for this, but it's good as an enabler for this if you are okay discarding some extra. I like the card, just it is work. It is not free or huge when it comes down. I don't like playing it as a 2-drop either. Like, generally, you're better off playing Souls of the Lost late in the game, like on turn 6, when you can also play a removal spell, hold up some mana, or play another threat at the same time. Yes, it gets scary fast, Thane, but it's not free. So, like, that ceiling, I mean, I might lower the effort. The thing is, like, it's still kind of fragile, but it breaks things open. We'll give this one a revisit because, like, one thing that I've found consistently is, like, all this is big, but big is good in this set. Like, size really matters. So we'll give it a revisit. But generally speaking, just, I like it. It's strong, but it's not free. Unlike this guy, I like it. It is strong. It is free. Like, if you play this on turn 1 and it grows on turn 2 to a 2/2 with menace, and then on turn 3 to a 3/3 with menace, and a 4/4 with menace, your opponent's going to have a really hard time deploying enough creatures to kill it. If you draw this late in the game and you play it out, then you're probably going to be able to descend the turn you play it, and then you can just kill something for mana with it. If you play it on turn 4, you can just play it as a removal spell. It's just very efficient. We're gonna see this in modern. I think it's gonna be a very powerful modern card. Maybe in Pioneer. Just turn 1, fetch land, Stalactite Stalker is as a 2/2 menace is so. Yeah, this card is very powerful. When was the last time I gave a 1-drop a 7? I don't know if I've ever given a 1-drop a 7 before. It might be the highest score I've ever given a 1-mana creature. I've given other 1-mana spells ranks like. But yeah, this one's really good. Stalactite Stalker is a very powerful and efficient creature. All right, up next we have, like, I gave it a floor of 5 with a ceiling of 7, but it is usually going to play at that ceiling of 7. And 1-drops that you're not upset about drawing really late in the game are just great in this format. Because, like, it's really difficult. Like, I found myself siding out 2 and 3 drops a lot at the pre-release just to have more impact later in the game when my opponent was really good at stalling me out early. And this one just, you always play it. Starving Revenant, really cool card. So, like, your worst case scenario on this is a 4-mana 4/4 that mills you 2. That's still solid, but a 4-mana 4/4 that mills you 2 and becomes a late game win condition, like a good late game win condition too. or it draws you some cards early. Like if your opponent's on a really heavy control deck, maybe blue black or blue white, then you could just draw 2 cards, lose 6 life. You're happy with that. The options on the Revenant are what make it powerful. Like whether you are drawing a card, losing 3 life, milling 1, milling 2, drawing 2 cards, losing 6 life. This gets you to descend 8 and then pays you for being at descend. So I gave it a 6, ceiling 7, floor 4, medium effort. Cool card, great bet. You want to be descending. Carrion's Journal. Love this card. I'm so glad. It's like, this is the first one we've seen. The first of these flip artifacts that turns into a cave. That so normally with these transform cards, the first ability feeds the second one. Well, you have to choose between the first ability and the second one for this one. Like either you're going to have permanents that you're going to start feeding into it and drawing cards. It's a good engine. Or you're going to discard your hand and flip it. Like we played against someone at early access who played this card just for drawing cards. They use it every turn. They played the 1 mana 1/1 greedy freebooter, drew a card, made a treasure, scryed 1, drew a card. Like they never flipped it. They were just drawing an extra card every turn. If you are top deck this in the late game, you can pay 4 mana for a land that starts letting you play creatures from your graveyard. It kind of always does what you want it to do, but you'll have other things that you wanted. Best added in a black-white sacrifice deck, which is a deck that wants to sacrifice artifacts and creatures. Yep. And then when you need to flip it, Thane, you'll really need to flip it, and you'll be very happy to have it. Yeah, it's so cool. Like the fact that so they managed to design like it can be both, but it's usually going to be either or. That's cool. I love that they gave us something that require like you can sacrifice other things to make an engine, but if you top deck it in the late game on an empty board, it's still good. Paratide, cool card. This is a lot of work for a Wrath. You can play this as a Wrath of God and you'll be very happy. So you need to make it into a Wrath of God by descending a lot, by putting things into your graveyard. But if you can set up a situation where you have a 5/5 with 4 permanents in your graveyard and get everything -4, you can get more value out of it. So like that floor of a 3, the thing is, sometimes your opponent will go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, and you'll be like, okay, turn 4, I gotta wipe the board, and you won't be able to wipe the board. You don't have enough cards in your grave. So it's not strictly worth a Wrath of God, which I'd put a Wrath usually at a 5 or a 6, but it can be better than a Wrath of God. Just work. This is a card we gotta work for. Hey Winter, how's it going? Good to see ya. We are in the middle of our set review, so I'm doing the greetings and answering questions between cards. This is the last of the black rares. I'm gonna have a piece of candy so that my throat doesn't give out, and water, and we'll keep. I like it. It's pretty cool, but it's not. I had not thought of that thing. I hadn't thought of that at all, March. Like. Yeah, this never kills your soul to the lost. Okay, that's a little mini combo. All right, moving on to the red rares. Water. All right, up first, we have possible best creature in the set. It's up there. Bone Horde Dracosaur, the dinosaur dragon. I love how derpy this thing is. Like, he looks so derpy. Like a 5 mana 5/5 flyer first strike would be good. It would be good. You'd play that, you'd be really happy. I'd give it a 6. I'll go home, take it highly, be in red for it. A 5 mana 5/5 that says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw 4 cards every turn. So like, yeah, it's not always gonna be 4 cards, but it's gonna average 3.25 card because if you turn over 2 lands, that kind of sucks. You get 2 treasures in a land, and then you get to attack with your 5 mana 5/5 flying first strike. If you turn over 2 non-land spells, then you make 6 more power, cast 2 spells, and then attack with your 5 mana 5/5 flying first striker. And it has relevant typing. It's just nuts. If you are not fully locked into your second color and you open this card, you're going to go red for it. And if you don't have great cards in it and no other red cards in your pool and you open it pack 2, you should switch to red for it. It just is very good. Yeah. Oh, lands make dinos. Oh, I misread that. In that case, it's a 5 mana 5/5 that always draws you 2 cards every turn. I see. You're absolutely right. I misread that. I just assumed, and that was incorrect of me. But cool. So that means that you can't miss. If you turn over land, you make 6 power and then attack with your flying first striker. If you turn over land, non-land, you make 6 power, a treasure, play your land, cast your spell. Very good. So here's the thing, Mega. This is indicative of why this is a good set. If you play this and your opponent kills it, you're fine. Everything's fine. Like, I agree with you, but like compared to the Wilds of Eldraine Unbeatable Red Mythic Dragon, that one was a 6 mana 4/6 with haste and flying, and it shot something for. I think that one was a much bigger problem. Having a turn to deal with your opponent's busted card is much better for gameplay and the health of the. So yes, this card wins the game, but only if left unanswered, and it can be answered. Yes, exactly. So, yes. So I think actually the Crimson Vow is a really fantastic comparison point for this set, because so many of the cards are the same, but the rares in this set are better. The rare, like not stronger, better for a good gameplay environment. Rares in this set require decisions, can be made to work for you with some work, with some effort, and like while very strong, this card doesn't win you the game. It's just good. Like Souls of Lost is huge, and it's a little weaker because it takes 2 cards to be this card. Like you can put effort into your rares to make them all as good as each other. So the ceilings on all my rares are much higher than usual. Like this one is this one is exceptional. Bonehorde Dragonsaur is exceptionally powerful. But generally speaking, most of the rares I'm much happier with. And no Toxrills. There's no Mayor. There's no Averbrecht Caretakers. There's no 6 mana 5/5 that makes you 20 blood. Right, exactly thing. Alright, I'm next. Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Really cool value piece. So most often this card will be 3 mana, draw a card on an artifact, which I like. We talked earlier about why 3 mana draw a card on an artifact is good. However, this one is much better when it flips than the blue. Like if you flip this card, discovering on every spell you cast is so strong. To get the full value of that ceiling of a 7, you'll usually need cards that care about Discover, and you need to build your deck a bit around Discover. But it's not hard to flip this eventually. You should assume that this card will flip within 3 to 4 turns of you casting it, because you can always discard a land or a permanent card if you build your deck right to replace it to send 1 the turn this comes down. Like it's not amazing. Like really late in, you're always happy to draw this because if you draw it, like turn 3 is not the best time to play it unless you plan on the game being very grindy, which you can plan for the game being. But you think the game's gonna be very grindy, play it on turn 3 and you start getting to Teckleton, the Searing Rift, as quickly as you can. If you don't think it's going to be, and you wait a few turns, you don't want to make sure you're putting down power on turn 3, a creature attacks the board, and then you can discard whatever you're not using to descend and place it. But like I like that this is an artifact that replaces itself, that can use stuff, then it eventually turns into a massive self-contained. I really want to draft with this Tyrant. I misread it. I thought, for some reason, the first time I read this, I thought it was if you discovered this turn, put a board counter on it, and it was so hard to flip. So when I drafted this in early access, I was picking up all these Discover cards aggressively. There's a whole bunch of cards I want to draft with Tyrant. I'm really excited. Breach's Eager Pillager. This is another card that might be the highest rating I've given just a 3 mana 3/3. So like the floor of this, that 5, that's if this is the only pirate in your deck. This is a 3 mana 3/3 with first strike. It blocks really well, it attacks really well, it draws you a card every attack, or it makes a treasure if you don't have mana to cast a spell, or turns off a blocker. If you're aggressive enough, that turning off a blocker is important to you, then that's a 5. That's just still really good. But in a pirates deck, if you can do so, if you have 3 pirates, you only need 3 pirates, and you can do all 3 of these things. If you start doing all 3 of these things, you're gonna win the game. This card is very powerful. It is a reason to be pirates, but it is also a reason to be aggressive, and you're just gonna want to splash. I will splash breaches if I have the ability to do so. He generates a lot of value on a really efficient body. He might come down a little bit because he's kind of fragile, but like he wins every combat with another 3 mana creature, just about. The exception is the 2/4 Death Toucher. But yeah, like the fact that you can't First Strike is very rare in that. And the rare First Strike is, the better it is when you have it on a creature. But yeah, I'll be forcing a red aggressive deck every time Oof, Tyrant, yeah. Well, it's got so much text on it, you're like, it can't have First Strike. Why would it have First Strike? Oh, heck yeah, Hatter. Tell her hi if you're still over there. All right, up next we have Dire Flail. I love this card. So this is a 1-mana artifact. We've already established how good 1-mana artifacts that do a thing are. If you've never played with a card like Bone Splitter, we talked a little bit earlier about how a few extra points of power enables a lot of attacks. Just getting 2 extra power occasionally, on demand for 1 mana is a lot of extra attack power. However, you will eventually be able to flip this. And if you flip this, then it's still only 1 mana. Every creature in your deck is now a massive threat, and every treasure in your deck is now something that kills a creature when you attack. Like, if you put this on a 0 power creature, then now your treasures are lightning bolt. Very powerful early, very powerful in an aggressive deck, in a mid-range deck, if you have any kinds of attackers. One of the best equipment we've seen in a long time. Just, if you're only playing it as a 1 mana plus 2/0 equip 1, that's a 5. Like, I would play that really happily. But if you get to flip it at all, which 5 mana is not that much. Like, by the time, if you play this on turn 1, you'll equip it on turn 3 or 4, craft it on turn 5 or 6. Really good. That's great, Hatter. Maybe I'll go check out that VOD of that a little. Hit the Mother Load. Card doesn't really work. So what this card does essentially is draw a card, make 6 treasures. Like, if you have a way to use 6 treasures, it does kind of replace itself. So I like it if you are likely going to have that much mana anyway. Like, if you're a treasure deck and you're making a bunch of treasures with other rares, you can go ahead and play it because it's often going to be a free spell. You'll hit a 3 mana spell and make 7 treasures, but they're tapped. You don't get to use them the same turn. It's only any good if you have cards that specifically use treasures, something that you can feed them to. There are a few cards that use. They tend to be rare. Probably not worth playing, but you have a dedicated treasure engine deck, or like Captain Storm, you can hit the Mother Load, put 6 counters on a pirate. That's cool. It's not great, but it's cool. And it's almost good enough to play, but you need so many cards that make treasures to ever actually get to the point where you can cast this card. And it's triple red, so it's tough to play in like a green black treasure deck that you splash it for. I don't have to imagine that, Ranger. I played a lot of Bone Splitter is one of the original equipment from Mirrodin. For those of you who don't know, when equipment was created in Mirrodin, they weren't really sure how good equipment should be. They sort of revisited it a few. I like where equipment is now. I think they did it. I think it took 10 years, but equipment is balanced and fun in a limited environment. It really was, Ranger. Inti, Cenacle of the Sun. Just really good. So when we had there's a 2-mana 2/2 whenever it attacks, give another creature trample. What you need in the Dinosaurs deck is good ways to punch through. But this one is essentially rummage, put a counter on a creature. Attacks as a 3/3 the first time. Nice little self-contained engine. I might drop it a little bit because it doesn't have relevant typing. But a 2-mana that attacks as a 3, so powerful. that. And it's not whenever this attack, just whenever anything attacks. So the fact that you can attack with your fire to grow something, or just attack with your dinosaur to punch through, makes it very good. Really good. There really was, Mega. I think the only one that, well, so the sagas took them a long time too, Mega. They really struggled. I think that they finally got the sagas figured out around Neon Dynasty and DMU. I think that's where, but I love that enchantments have, now that artifacts have colors, giving enchantments their own identity in the form of sagas was a really, and then battles, I think they nailed. I really like battles. I think they nailed battles the first time. I think that's the first time I can say that about a card type. No, but they weren't good either. They weren't they weren't interesting. Like yeah. I think the vehicles I like where vehicles are now too, Mega. But the first sagas weren't like, name one. Trying to think of any saga that sees play from DM. History of an Alien was sweet. That was a good one. But like that one didn't feel special either. Like it didn't feel like that. Outlaws Reborn was a good one too. But they were simple. They weren't all good, and they didn't nail the rare ones. All right, Magmatic Galleon. Are just fantastic. 5 mana, 5/5 that kills a creature and occasionally makes a treasure. Like dealing 5 damage to a 5/5 is ideal, but killing a 4/4 making a treasure is also kick-ass. There's a lot of good ways to blink it or return it. A really good card with the very first rare we looked at, like this Whale's Awakening. It's just synergistic and powerful and efficient. Really good red rare. For me, Mega, it means that having cards... I think this is better than Flametongue Kavu, because the thing about Flametongue Kavu is Flametongue Kavu was very good, but still pretty reasonable within the format, because you would kill a 4/4 and then they would trade a 2/2 with it. With Magmatic Galleon, you kill a 5/5 and they have to trade a 5/5 with it. Yep. Well, so like Abuelo and Magmatic Galleon blink really well. This card's just very efficient. Like you saw me playing Runaway Boulder as 6 mana deal 6. This is 5 mana deal 5 with a 5/5 attached. Just good. This card's just good. It's usually going to play near that ceiling of an 8. That floor of a 6 is if you can't crew it. Crew 2 isn't free. Like you do have to give it a real creature. Yes. But like it's not, most creatures can crew this, but you will always have to give up a creature to crew, which is fine. Like you're going to trade it off aggressively. Take your 2 for 1. Ogier Axonil. Okay. So I had somebody at the pre-release play this card. That my one loss to the pre-release was in the finals. And we had a great game 1, great game 2. And game 3, I thought I was going to win. They're at like 3 life. They played Ogier, and I untapped and I petrified it and attacked. And I got into 2, and he had some gnomes out. And he played the 2 mana, and he had 1 Temple Altasaur, which taps to deal 2 damage to each opponent. So he played, so he goes staggering size. Play the 1/3 that lets you tap 2 untapped creatures to deal 1 damage to your opponent. Tap the Altasaur, shoot you for 10. Shoot me for 10, and he could have shot me for another 30 damage. So this card is a lot like, yes, it does. So this card is a lot, it's like Imodane in the last set. So if this were a 4 mana 4/4 with trample that died into a land with no other text, it would be pretty good. Like it wouldn't be a first pick, but it would be something that you weren't upset playing in your red deck or in your 2 color. It is worth noting it is incredibly difficult to turn it back into a god. I think it's the hardest god to turn back into a god from the land. Very hard to flip Temple of Power into Ogier Axonil. But this is a 4 mana 4/4 with very powerful common combo pieces. Like there's a 2 mana 1/3 which you can tap 2 untapped artifact creatures or artifacts or creatures, deal 1 damage to your opponent. And that card is it's almost good enough to play on its own. It is good enough to play if you are making tokens or artifacts, and it is fantastic with Osier. So like it I like it, Tyrant. Yes. So, but there's that, and then there's the 5 mana 4/5 that shocks your opponent to tap, and both of those cards are good enough to play on their own, or very close to good enough to play on their own. And then there's 4 mana 4/4 that dies into a land, buffs them. So like it's just not as hard as some of the other game-winning combos to assemble as we. So I gave it a 7, which is high for this style of cards. Like I only gave Imidane a 5. And Imidane comboed with Beam Splitter Bolt 9 mana. I mean that seems like it happened. But yeah, 4 mana 4/4 with huge upside. Great card. Poetic Ingenuity. First of all, just beautiful. I love the words together. Like Poetic Ingenuity is a beautiful pair of two. The card is also very cute. It is Saheeli and Huatli being inspiring to each other. The card self-enables. I actually wanted to raise the floor. You do need artifact spells. It's not hard to get artifacts. So, like, you don't need dinosaurs. You just need artifacts. Because the artifacts make the dinosaurs, which makes the treasures. If you play this and can make a treasure in the same turn, you are more likely to also, like, a turn 2 dinosaur, turn 3 Poetic Ingenuity, attack, make a treasure, cast a 1-mana artifact is a very possible play line. So if you do play this in a dinosaur deck and attack with 6 dinosaurs and make 6 treasures, you're going to win that game. But it only takes a few artifacts to get this really going. So I gave it a floor of 4, but its ceiling is 8. So it's work, but it's worth it. I love these payoffs. The engines and payoffs you get are so cool. That's mean, Tired. Me too, Troy. I love the Huatli Saheeli thing. We're gonna look at both those cards today. It's really good. All right, last red rare. The only one I gave higher than the first red rare is Trumpeting Carnosaur. So you really want to play this, if you can, as a 6 mana 7/6 trample that draws a card, and is a relevant type. But the fact that this never gets stuck in your hand, this never gets stuck as something that you can't cast because it's also a relevant burn spell, bumps it up for me. So like this is a really good example of what I mean when I say like, so Resolved, this card is better. This is a Bonehorde Dracosaur is a better card if it's in play. Even though Trumpeting Carnosaur wins the head-to-head, like it attacks into it. But the fact that if you're worried about your opponent having a removal spell, or if you are stuck at 3 mana, this is still a relevant card, makes it awesome. Oh my god, Tyne, that's awesome. And you can blink it, and you can shock. So like, there's a I beat somebody by sheer luck who went turn 3 Soul Coil Viper, turn 4 Shoot My Creature, Reanimate Carnosaur, discover 5 into a Poetic Ingenuity. But then I had the removal spell for the Carnosaur, and they just never recovered. They never played another dinosaur. But yes, you can. This does so much within this set on top of a very good card. Right, the reanimation spells are good in this set. Dinosaurs are great, man. They're really good in this set. All right, last color, and then there's a lot of multicolored cards. So, Candy, Tom. Getting water, I'll be right back. Right back. Sorry, I need to leave just as you got here. I need a short break. 30 seconds. Oh my god, Troy. That's the best. I just realized that all of my music hasn't been playing. Why hasn't my music been playing? Huh. Hello. Alright, so you can hear me, but there's no music. I refresh. Hi. Troubleshooting music. It's okay if there's no music. Know why it wasn't playing? Still isn't. Oh man, so I just came back from getting water and so weird. Like I was like, I walked through the door and I'm like, what's wrong? What is different? And it's that I'm door open for the time, because my dog likes it. One of those things. All right, let's move on to the green cards. Conscious. Okay, okay, green cards. First one is Bedrock Tortoise. Simply a 4-mana 6/6. There are other cool things about this card. Like the fact that it makes toughness happen, like your other high toughness creatures deal damage. There's a few where that matters, like market gnomes. But for the most part, it's a 4-mana 6/6. That is good. That is way above rate. It trades off for the whole game. And the hexproof on your turn is relevant. There's this nice green theme where it's like they're trying to make us feel safer about playing auras and paying into equip costs and crafting, and I love it. Like there's 3 different cards that punish people for playing spells on your turn. Um, but yeah, 4-mana 6/6. The one note with Bedrock Tortoise is most of green's removal is fight spells. +1/+0, deal damage equal to its power to target creature. It's +1/+1 counter, fight target creature. Or dinosaurs that make creatures deal damage equal to their power to other creatures. This has no power. It attacks like a 6/6, blocks like a 6/6. It is not a 6/6. So don't make it fight other creatures. Now, that's just really important. Don't make it fight other creatures. Like, it'll say 6/6 on Arena. When you play this card on MTG Arena, it'll be a 4-mana 6/6. Don't make it fight. It's just a 6/6 for 4 that can't fight. There we go. It is not a 6/6. Arena will tell you it's a 6/6, and you will play. You will make your Bedrock Tortoise fight target creature, and then you will be confused as to why it didn't work. This is your warning. Like, don't make it fight other creatures. Be happy that you have a 4-mana 6/6. Osmium Confluence. Love this card. All right, so your floor on this card. I'm assuming that you have 1 cave in your deck. If you have 1 cave in your deck, this is a 5-mana 6/6 that comes into play tapped. Ideally, with the option of destroying enchantments. Don't worry too much about that one. Like, you might hit a Petrify. There are relevant strong enchantments, but usually this is going to be a payoff for being caves. You don't need a ton of caves. If you have 3 caves in play, then be happy that you just put 9 power out for 5 mana. If you had to have some of the caves, like the flexibility of this card makes so being able to go get a cave and make it a 6/6, because it doesn't target for the. So if this said put 3+1 counters on target cave, you wouldn't be able to target. But the way that it's worded, search up 2 caves, make one of them into a 3/3. Search up 1 cave, make it into a 6/6. Search up 1 cave, make it into a 3 for an enchantment. Have to have a cave in your deck But if you have a couple caves in your deck, this card will do just fine for you. If you have a bunch of caves in your deck, then be happy you have a 9/9. But like you can pick it a little high because as long as you have one cave, it's functional. Galta, Stampede Tyrant. I gave it a 3. It's an 8 mana 12/12. You can ignore the text. It's an 8 mana 12/12. Like, yeah, you can put creatures into play. It is really cool to reanimate. Like, you can defossilize it, dump your hand out. But generally speaking, 8 mana is just too much for a card that doesn't have haste. If you can give it haste, or if you can play, Galta is good. Otherwise, don't be fooled by the 8 mana 12/12. Like, I had somebody cast this and then they got double blocked and they would just look so sad, like, because they paid 8 mana for it. I gave it a 3 with a floor of 2. The ceiling of a 5 is as a reanimation target. I don't even know that's a better reanimation target than the land. Right. So, like, it's fine. You need a late game threat, a late game card that wins the game. Galta is not a good one, but it does do that. So if you have a bunch of things, a bunch of ramp sources, nothing else to play Galta. And if you drafted Galta because you want to play Galta in Constructed, go ahead. But like, there are just better things to be doing with 8 mana in this format. Like, you would rather be crafting, or you would rather be deploying other 6 mana threats. Yeah, like, this is a 12/12. You don't have to worry about the rest of the text. It's a finisher. Like, sometimes you need a finisher. Ideally, you will have other finishers, but yeah, sometimes it'll be Galta. Fine. Cool card though. I love the art. Galta's, like, look how much bigger Galta is than the other. All right, Growing Rides of Itlimoc. So it does replace itself. If you built your deck right, you should assume that this is a 3 mana cantrip. The trick is using all that mana. So like, if you hit a creature off the Growing Rights when you cast it, then you'll probably flip it turn 5 or turn 6. And if this was draw a card, make a land later, it's not great. Like, it's still a 3, it's playable. But there are good mana sinks in this. There is a 1 mana 1/1 that you can pay 3 to explore. You can build your deck around having mana sink, like around making huge amounts of mana and then using it well. But you need to have the mana sinks before the Growing Right. You need to have good things to do with the Gaia's Cradle before you pick up the crate. So that's why the ceiling is a 6, but I only gave it a 3. Because like, I will take the 3 mana 3/3 that makes a 1/1 5 mana over the Growing Right. Yeah, but they're not all worth it, Troy. The good ones are really good. If you have a good mana sink, go ahead and take the Growing Right. Then it's good, but it's not free. Also, it gets better if you have more bombs. Like, if you have, I'm more likely to play Growing Rides of Itlimoc with a Trumpeting Carnosaur, not because of the mana I get for casting it, because I'm probably not going to flip the Growing Rides until turn 6, because it looks for it. I can go 4 cards down to find it. That's pretty cool. We'll talk about the core soon, Troy. It's an artifact. So, like, yes. So, but the thing is, Thane, you are capped on the number of Seeker of Sunlights you can have. That's the 1 mana 1/1 that you can pay 3 to explore. But like, you can't build a good deck with 4 copies of Seeker of Sun. You can run 1 or 2, and then the rest of that, the cards in that deck, you want to have explore. So like, you don't want that to be your only mana sink, but it's a good start. You can put 1 or 2 copies of that. So this is not like, it is much more of a build around than it appears to be at first glance, is the point I'm trying to, like, if you can get it up to a 6, great. But you got to get it up to a 6 or I'd be happy to play it. It is a very good constructed card. All right, Huatli. I'm so glad they gave us a lesbian icon couple, and they're both fantastic. Huatli is so powerful in this set. So your worst case scenario with Huatli is a 3 mana 2/3 that gets you a land that fixes your mana. That's your worst case scenario. Generally speaking, if you are green red or green white or green with good fixing or caves or 5 color, you will have no trouble flipping her because she gets you your missing color, one of them. And so she's a 3 mana 2/3, blocks really well early, gets you a land, turn 5, creates 2 dinosaurs, which then make mana and gets you another dinosaur and then wins the game. Um, like your worst case scenario on Huatli is a 2-for-1. Your best case scenario on Huatli is game. Your normal case scenario is just a normal 4-for-1 that lets you cast all your spells. Love her. She's so love her art, love her card, love her saga. I love that her saga is a piece of clothing. Wait, does she die? Is this how I find out that Huatli dies in the story? Waiting for someone to tell me if Huatli dies in the story. I don't feel bad playing her. I don't know. I'm wondering if she dies in the story because she disappears. Like, she doesn't turn back into Huatli after 4. You sacrifice her after 4. So the card implies that she comes down and then becomes the roar of the 5th people and dies. I mean, like, that is the lesbian stereotype, is that anytime they're featured in a story, one of them dies. I don't like the stereotype, but that is what I know in those stories. Maybe it's just too much manga. All right, up next we've got Hulking Raptor. 4 mana, 5/3 that makes 2. It dies to an Abrade. It's still a 5-power creature. It trades down a lot. Very likely that what you do is play this as a good threat and that your opponent blocks with a 2 or 3 drop. But going to 7 mana on turn 5 is really good. And it's also going to take their whole turn to stop you. So, solid card. There are better dinosaurs, but not that many. And put some work into it. You'll get some work out of it. I'd get 1 extra toughness on it if you have one way to get a counter onto it, a map token, something like that is great. But like there are good ways to use that mana, and it's an efficient dinosaur. I gave it a 5. The floor is 4, which that's just, normal 4 mana 5/3 with Ward 2. And that ceiling is if you can use that 6 and 7 mana that you get out of this. The creatures that you'll find as we go, that the creatures that make mana and are relevant bodies and cards in addition to that are very, very good in it. Like this Intrepid Paleontologist is a great card. 2 mana 2/2 mana dork that made mana of any color. I'd play that very happily. I'd pick it really highly. Also, it's graveyard hate and is set without a lot of graveyard hate. Also, it lets you recast all your dinosaurs. So, very good. Actually, 6 I think is right on it. Because like it's fragile, relatively low impact until late in the game. Like if you get to the point where you're reanimating your dinosaurs, you're in really good shape. But a great card all around. This is a great way to use 11 mana. So this one, I was sitting next to Mr. Metronome, and he passed this to me, and I went over and said, "Hey, did you just first pick an Abrade?" And he said, "All I can confirm is that I passed you an Intrepid Paleontologist. Just be happy about it." Yeah, okay, I'm gonna be really happy about this. That's not what he said. He's the draft integrity. But yes, that is what happened. Great, strong card. All right, up next is Jade Light Spelunker. I love it. All right, sorry, one sec. I just message. Dinobots. So this is an efficient card at any point of the game. It is always going to be good. All right. So if you play as a 1 mana 1/1, that's not great. But a 2 mana 1/1 that explores is pretty good. A 3 mana 2/2, a 3 mana potentially 3/3 that explores twice is great. It just scales up and up and up and up. It gets better and better. Like I'm probably raising. Because like the thing is, I will take this if I'm not green. I will splash for this. Exploring 7 times, 8 times, 9 times is so powerful. Like a 7 mana 5/5 that draws 2 cards, so good. And you can dig for specific cards. Like if you need something out of your deck, we're scrambling this one up. So I'm gonna give it a 7 with a floor of 6. Yeah, I like this. Oh my god, so I lost a game. I won the match, but I played game 1. I had 11 red sources in the deck, okay? And all I needed was a red source, and I was so late in the game, I had every forest and plains in the deck out. So I played Jade Light Spelunker for 8 and explored 8, and I didn't get the red source. Then I picked it up with the 3/1 pup and explored for 9, and I didn't get the red source, which means that all 11 cards in my library were red sources, and I lost. I couldn't cast any. I had 3 Abrades in hand, no red source. But yeah, I won the next 2 games because it was fine because my deck was busted because I had 3 Abrades and a Jade Light Spelunker. This card is very good because you can pay, like, you won your 8 mana 7/7 to have drawn you some cards to have done some filtering. I'm happy to splash it. It's very easy to splash. It's better if you're green. So like that's the floor of a, like that's when it's gonna be a 7. But like I'll splash it in other colors and it'll only be it's like if I'm a blue-black deck with a couple forests and green sources for this J-Light Spelunk, that is only going to be a late game card. I'm only going to play it for Explorer 4 or 5. But if it's green, I'm okay playing it on Explorer 1 or 2, especially if I can pick it up later. Very strong. All right, thank you so much, Night Dark. I really appreciate you looking it up. All right, up next we have Ogier Kaslam, Deepest Growth. But here's that green god we were going to talk about. This is my favorite art out of all of the gods. It is also the easiest to turn back into a creature from the permanent. But it's also easier to interact with. So it's a 5 mana 6/5. Chances are it'll draw you 2 cards when it hits, if it hits for a lot. But there are enough cards that actually interact with it on the ground. The black one has like 5 cards that can block it in the deal with it in. Whereas Ogier Kaslam there's a lot of cards in each color that your opponent is going to be able to block it, or to grow their 6/6 up to a 7/7 to block. So it's still very good. Like I gave it a 7, and it's almost always going to play at that ceiling of a 7. Yeah, you do get to put it into play, but like I don't. So I have it at number 2. I think the black god is better than. I think Aklataz is a better god than the green god. Like it has to connect. The green god has to connect. Whereas like if you're in a situation where, like, let's say your opponent. So both of them win you the game against a control deck that doesn't have a very specific. They both say I win the game against a given control. But if your opponent is very aggressive with a go wide strategy, Aklazatz stops that. He says, I am stable now. I can block and gain 4 life. You're not going to get through this. And then once I start attacking, I gain 4 life every attack and make a blocker. So I only gave it 1 point less than the Black God, but it's still very good. Just in direct comparison to the Black God, I think the black one is better. So it's not that it's not important to be able to recur it, Mega. It's that in the situation where recurring it is important, it is equally easy on both gods. And in the situation where recurring it is not important, that it's only against hyper aggressive decks. And against hyper aggressive decks, you'd rather have the black god than the. Both of them say when I start connecting with this creature, I win the game. Like if this hits them twice, you win the game. If the black one hits them twice, you win the game. So we are judging them by the scenario where that's not happening. And in that case, the black one is rated high. Also, this one wins the head-to-head. If you have the green god and they have the black god, then this one wins. But that's only if you got your, like, it actually just goes to whoever plays it first. Because race. But no, this is the easiest one to turn back into a creature, which is just important. All right, so yeah, I gave it a 7 with a ceiling of 7. It's usually going to play at that ceiling of 7. I should probably raise the ceiling to an 8, but still. Like, I just see this as once it starts hitting, you win the game. So your opponent has to stop it from hitting. Pugnacious Hammer Skull. Love this card. It's a 3-mana 6/6. Just a 3-mana 6/6. So card's just fantastic. This is not a real drawback. So the drawback of Pugnacious Hammer Skull doesn't say I am now a, like, let's say you have no other dinosaurs in your deck. It doesn't say that this is now a worse card. It just makes it a 3. If you are attacking for a 3, if you attack with a 3/3 twice, that's the same as attacking with the Pugnacious Hammer Skull 1. And yes, they can chump block it for longer, but that's one of the reasons that I keep highlighting how valuable it is. A good 3-mana 6/6. You can play it on turn 3 without any of the dinosaurs in play and just wait until you have a dinosaur to start attacking. Also, it's good in the dinosaur deck specifically because so many cards that care about dinosaurs care about power of specific dinosaurs. There's a 2-mana 3/2 yearling that it turns into a 6/2 when you play the Hammer Skull on turn 3. There's an It's Quinth with 4 mana. This will deal 6 damage to something. A 3-mana 6/6 is always good. It is better in this set than it has. Alright, up next we've got Sentinel of the Nameless City. Value Machine. 3-mana 3/4 that makes a map good enough. The fact that it has Vigilance makes it better. And the thing about the Sentinel is, like, in a lot of situations, that's Wild March. So if you play Sentinel of the Nameless City and you make a map, then your opponent will usually try to address that by playing out a 4/4. Like, let's say they are on the play and they go turn 4, 4/4. But you get to use your map to make Sentinel of the Nameless City a 4/5, attack and make a map. Now, they're exactly where they were, and they have to just hope that all the Sentinel does is draw you an extra card so that they can deploy something that actually blocks it. Yeah, maps are very strong. Something that makes a lot of maps is very strong. And this card would be pushed enough on just the stats if it didn't make maps. Your 3-drop surviving a Braid is a big deal. Skullport Spore Nexus. Actually, not as hard to work with as it looks. You can play. I saw somebody play a turn 3 Hammer Skull, turn 4 Skullport Spore. It's, if you can get this down to like 4 mana, you're very happy, and it just grinds a lot of value over the course. That floor of a 3 is, it's usually going to play at a 3 or a 4, which is, this is your late game card. Grind your value. Engine, it is a lot like Great Henge. So I would say, Troy, it's Great Henge without drawing the cards, or without gaining the life. It still nets that value, but you don't gain the life. Cool card, though. Okay. One sec. So I just wanted to revisit these notes before we start on the multicolored cards. There are a lot of multicolored and artifact cards compared to other sets. Yep. Card is very good. So the thing that is most likely to change off this is the effort. So if it turns out to be easier than I think it is right now to make it work, then the effort will come down, the rating will come up, but the floor and ceiling are still going to be pretty close. It's good, but the thing is, it's not free. So, like, if you have a like, this card makes good cards insanely good. Like, but saying that I have to have a Pugnacious Hammer Skull for the card to be good, is not a reason to play it. So, like, if I'm playing a fair game without rares, then I'm going to play this on turn 7 or 8. And it will win me the game. But that is normal for a card that doesn't come down until turn 7 or 8. Like, it's not, like, yes, this is 8 mana. This card's good, but it is work. Like, a 4 is still a good card. I'll still play that. And your goal is to get it up to a 7. But I don't think you can get it to a 7 without rares. Think about that. Take a quick look at our green cards. So if you have a Capybara that you've descended on, then it's only 4 mana. So you could conceivably turn it on turn 4. This one? It's a 3/4 though. If it were a 3... Oh, so the 3/1 Explorer Merfolk with 4 power does let you play the Nexus turn 4. And it makes it really hard to block. That's a fair point, Tyrant. Like, if we can get enough 4 power 3 drops online to play this on turn 4, it does get a lot better. We can raise the... I mean, that's still work though, right? Because you need to then get that creature to die. Does make blocking him. Yeah, okay, we'll come up. This is the rating that I was deciding between. Was 3 to 7 medium, or because like the problem is if your opponent is running enough removal, they can preemptively stop you from casting them. But it's not. I don't think it's that easy to cast it on turn. I don't think that's worth considering. I don't think people will overlook that. Like, people only have to lose that one time to stop. But I like this rating. It's highly impactful and not easy to catch. All right, so you did talk me up on that. All right, multicolored cards. Abuelo, Ancestral Echo. I love this card. So 3 mana 2/2. So, note about the multicolored cards. In some sets, I say, well, I factor the color restrictions into the cost of the card. And it's really obvious on something like a Necropotence or that black 1 demon. But for the multicolored cards, I'm assuming that this is the color pair you're in. And I will talk about splashing it, which is a little different from how I've done multicolored cards in the I just realized it makes sense to treat this as a Azorius card and to rate it as if or as a reason to become Azorius. So 3 mana 2/2 Flying Ward 2 that blinks something. There are a lot of very powerful things, especially in a 3-color deck. I'm happy to splash for him. And your worst case scenario is just a 3 mana 2/2 Flying Ward 2. That's pretty good. A Winddrake with Ward 2 is pretty good, but if you can cast Abuelo, you can also blink with him. And I like to splash him in the red decks off treasures. Just an efficient value machine that is hard to disrupt. The Ancient One. So this one I looked at, and then again, and then I looked at again, and then I lost to it in early access. So yes, it's a 2 mana 8/8 that you have to descend 8. If you are a dedicated descend deck, you'll get there fast. Like, excuse me, this will do really well for you. If you turn 1, the 1 mana craft card that mills you 1, turn 5, you mill yourself 5 or 4 or whatever. There's lots of good ways to force descend to happen, and then you're attacking with your 2 mana 8/8. But in the event that there's a board stall, which there often is, Death Touchers, maybe you didn't quite get to descend, this legitimately just mills your opponent out. Like, if you discard a 5-drop a few times, you'll mill them out. You'll mill them out so fast. You can target yourself once with the first copy to start attacking, and if you can't attack for some reason, then you can start milling your opponent out. And this card does it by itself. Like, 3 to 4 activations to win the game is really strong. A very powerful Mythic. Good payoff for being Black Descend, and you really have to be a Descend deck. You want to work on being. All right. Oh, I also. Hang on. There are not 2 multicolored cards per. Okay, yeah, I went in color order for this. So we're gonna do the 2 blue-black cards because there are mostly 2 multicolored. And it seems like they almost accounted for this in some. Talk about that more. All right, Whale of the Forgotten card's just good because your worst case scenario of like if the ability to choose between these makes it good. Like bouncing a permanent or looking at the top 3 cards of your library is good enough. There's the niche case of your opponent discarding a card, usually because they return something to their hand and you know what it is. Otherwise, you're going to want to anticipate or bounce a permanent. But the fact that you can do all 3. Even if it's a small percentage of the time, makes this card very powerful. So like, It's a 7 in the Descend deck, in the dedicated Descend deck. You have to be a little careful because you're limited on how many non-permanent spells you can run. But it's a 3 or a 4 otherwise. Like, the options make it powerful. This is a really cool card. Great reason to be Descend. I think they nailed the payoffs, and like the payoffs at rare and the enablers at rare are so cool in this set. All right, Molten Collapse, very efficient removal spell. The non-creature, non-land permanent is relevant a surprising amount of the time. There's because if your opponent has like the 4/4 vehicle that descends 8 and can attack, if it's descend, it's a crew 1, and if you're at descend 8, it can't be blocked. You'll occasionally get to hit something like that, or a 1-mana scry 2 that flips into a 1/4 flyer, or just a map token or a treasure token. Like, the fact that this is 2 mana, destroy target creature or planeswalker is great, and the fact that you can hit other things with it is good too. It's very efficient removal in black-red specifically. However, removal is just okay in this set. We looked at a lot of cards that you like have to kill, but a lot of bombs like this next one that killing just doesn't do you much. Palladius Hatcher, your fail case for this, usually a 5/3 that leaves 0/1 and a 3/3. Play it, and you make a 3/3 with haste, and then kill it on their turn. Still a great card. If it goes unchecked, then it makes 11 power for 5 mana, 6 of which has haste. It also hastes all of your other dinosaurs. It blinks, it reanimates. You can pick it up with any kind of raised dead effects. I think this is one of those cards that makes there's a 6 mana, return a permanent to your hand, discover 4. It makes this card, or it's 5 mana, discover 4, return a permanent card from graveyard to hand. Like, I'll play that card if I have some Palladius Hatchers. Just so much value, one powerful card. It does. And the thing is, this is the kind of card, like, there's a lot of cards like this that make cards like Molten Collapse a little bit worse. Because single target removal just can't compete with the power of the cards you're trying to remove. Yeah, it just does it all. Take it, be dinosaurs, you'll have fun. All right, Sovereign Okinek Ahau. I think I said that right. 4 mana, 3/4 with ward, not quite good enough. If it gets 1 attack in if it grows 2 creatures on its first attack, really happy. If it gets, this has the potential to put 8 extra power on board. It works well with a lot of what green-white's trying to do. Growth, it works well with everything that green and blue are trying to do. This is a powerful, efficient pumper. If you don't have a ton of pump, it's going to be a 4 mana 3/4 that grows a few things. If you have a ton of pump, I gave it that ceiling of an 8. Japper, thank you so much for the raid. I'm so sorry that you didn't get the big emote explosion. We are doing our full set review. We are on the Mythics and Rares today. So, hi everybody. If you haven't met me, I am Scuffle. I write for Playing MTG, and every set I do a full set overview for all of this. Thank you so much for the raid, Jaffer. How was your stream? Your timing was excellent. Sorry, normally you'd get the big explosion. But today, it's a set review. So we're actually doing the Rares and Mythics, and we just started out the multicolored ones. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm taking questions about each after we talk about each. So we are on the multicolored Rares and Mythics right now. And since we just had a bunch of new people in, I have a slightly different system than most people. So I use a Scuffle system. Sorry, and after me. We go on a Explorer Convoke looks really fun. I was trying to decide what to play in Pioneer between Convoke and Spirits. So we use a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is a card you should never play, and then a 10 is a card that wins the game. Then I use a floor and a ceiling, and then the effort it takes to bridge the gap from floor to ceiling. So I usually do limited content. So today we are doing the set review before we get to draft tomorrow. Oh man, it looks really good, Tyrant. So we were just on Sovereign Okinek Ahau. We're gonna move on to the next one. We're doing the multicolored cards in color band. Up next we have Amalia Benavides Aguirre. It is. You want to pump it once, March, but you only have to pump it once. And you get to do it pretty safely because of the ward. I like this card a So Amalia's solid. She is a 2-mana 2/2 with Ward 3 life. That's pretty good in the aggressive decks. In the black-white stack decks, you kind of want to be a little range. There are 14 ways to gain life in 14 playable ways. 14 ways that you're happy to play. And any of those make her a lot stronger. So I gave her a rating of a 4, which is above filler. It Her being a vampire is also relevant to some of the card types. The floor of a 3, that's if you don't have a ton of ways to get life, maybe just a few. 3 is filler. And then if you can get her up to that ceiling of a 6, that's because you have ways to gain life repeated. Either the 1-mana 1 lifelingers, the 2-mana 1/1 lifelingers, a way to mix vampires. Really cool card. In the story, she makes maps, and then she makes the map with her blood, and then the map is destroyed, then the land that she made the map of is destroyed. Love it. Voodoo for lands. I really want to see somebody get her to 20 power. It's so difficult, but I want to see it happen so badly. She's got a cool... Have you played the Jaffer? Are you going to play the constructed combo with her? With Wildwood Walker? The 1/3, whenever you explore, gain 3 life? I think that one's pretty good. You just need to trigger it in that first life. It'd be cool. I want to see her in constructed, and she will pop off occasionally in draft. It's just a little bit tough to make her. All right, Vito, Fanatic of Aklotok. So 4-mana 4/4 flyer, that's good. You'll play a 4-mana 4/4. You do need to have other permanents to sacrifice, but like sometimes you'll just gain an extra couple life points from your gnomes, Tinker's Totes. But if you can get it up to that 4/3 black vampire, you're gonna be very happy. Making 2 vampires with flying for 4 mana is the game. Vito is worth building around. It is worth picking up as many sack outlets as you can get to play with them. Very good card. Up next, we have the other half of our power couple this set. Look at her working with her lattice. This card is so cool. So this is a reason to be blue-red specifically. You don't have to do anything past that. But if you can get Saheeli down with a 1 artifact, there are a lot of powerful artifacts that are worth copying. And it's only 2 mana. I'm so glad they finally gave us a cost-effective way. Limited. If you can copy like a Lodestone Needle a few times, you win the game. Also, due to the wording, because you stack it at the beginning of the next end step, this is the templating that lets you can use it on your opponent's end step, untap, use it on your own card, and then attack with 3 copies of the same. Yeah, I think like it feels like worse Greasefang, but it also kind of fits into Greasefang. Like I feel like people are gonna try and make a Greasefang shell with it, because it's nice having access to the life gain. You're not gonna get burned out in Greasefang, but like, how much extra room can you have? You would need to replace your like salvages or creatures. I don't know if that's. I mean, you'd still run salvage, but you probably wouldn't run enchantment anymore, and like Rafine Performance probably gets replaced. It's weird. Like, is Branch Walker a functional replacement for Rafine's? Yeah, well, I think it is a Coco deck. I like it. Like, I'm gonna give it a try. Sorry, I got distracted because constructed is cool, but we're focusing on limited right now. So I gave Saheeli a 7 with a floor of 6. That's if you just get to cast her. We are assuming you can cast her in your multicolor. But that ceiling of an 8, she does win you the game if you have good things to copy. There are very good copy in this. That's the same way, so. The Belligerent. Love this card. So this one's like Future Sight. You will usually only get to do it once. So if you play a 3-mana 3-power creature and then the Belligerent turn 4, on turn 5, you get to crew it and attack. And you should get to always cast your spell. So you can, sometimes you'll like, your curve just ends up being pretty low in the blue-red deck. So if you're a blue-red proactive deck without counter spells, then you'll get to play a lot of spells off the top. Land, artifact, and you'll keep going to hit a land. A lot like Future Sight. However, if you get to attack with this more than once, you're probably winning. I'm just assuming that your opponent's going to be piling things in front of this to stop it. Yes, you get Future Sight for a turn and a treasure. You get to use the treasure as well. I love that they're making cool ships. This is a great ship. Yeah, Future Sight, for every turn you get to attack with it, solid in general. Love the card. Up next, we have Squirming Emergence. It's a good reanimator card. It is specifically a... So there's two builds of the reanimator deck. The first one is where you really prioritize your fossilizes and your snakes. Pick up relevant creatures that you discard, like land cyclers. Give some carnosaurs. Second is where you try and hit those big creatures by milling yourself by discarding, and this is much better in the ladder deck. It's not a great card in general, but you can make it work in that descent deck, and if you're descending enough anyway, it is worth just using as a normal single target raise. It also picks up other permanents, which is nice, like a toolbox in the descent deck of being able to pick up a petrify, or even like a random enchantment that way earlier. Happy with. It's a solid card all around, so I gave it a 3. Playable, but in the descent deck you can get it up to that ceiling of a 5. It's never amazing. It's always good as the permanent. I love this fungus hat. So are the funguses hats that grew on skulls or other bodies, or is it just a coincidence? Due to the archaic Brazen Coalition guidelines regarding hats, you mycoids are now technically pyre captains. So as long as you're wearing the hat, you're the captain. So they are pyre captains. Alright, good to know. The Myco Tyrant. Cool card, lot of work. This is a lot of work. But it does win you the game if you can get it going. So what you want with this are some of the artifacts that let you mill yourself, or some of the cards that you mill yourself, because you have to be making this bigger the turn it comes down. Unlike a lot of the other descent cards, you don't get to dump 9 cards into your graveyard and then play a 9/9. You have to mill right away. So you want a few, like, you can treat this as a 6-drop and mill yourself a few. There are a lot of cards that are like almost playable elsewhere. You pay 3 mana, you look at the top cards, put graveyard. This one is a lot of work to get going, but if you can make 3 fungus, well, that's 6 power for 3 mana. So it really is a dedicated descend deck, not a deck that's already descended. You want to be able to descend more after you play it. That means that it's usually going to be a multi card. So I gave it a 5 with a floor of a 3 and a ceiling of 7. I'm gonna play somewhere right in the middle. There are 7 other funguses, and that includes cards that make. Up next, we have Anim Bakal, the 1000th Moon. This is one of the best multicolored cards. It is only 3 mana. If you ever play with Krenko, I know we just got a bunch of Explorer people. It just makes more and more and more and more tokens. So you play this on turn. You play a 2-drop. You play this on turn 3. It's a 3 mana 2/3 that comes with a gnome. Then the next turn, it attacks and makes 2 gnomes, and it attacks for 4, then it attacks for 6, and well, it attacks for 6 plus the 2 gnomes, 1 gnome, attacks for 9. Very powerful card, a reason to be red-white, worth going aggro for her, but you don't have to be aggro. You can mid-range or control deck and just use this as your 1 card that wins the game by itself. You manage to give it a staggering, like, it makes all pump spells better. And give it +3/+3, make 3 extra gnomes, you'll be very happy. Really powerful card. I think this is the highest rated multi-color. Nope, I gave Palani's Hatcher this. Incredibly powerful Boros rare. Yeah, 3 +1/+1 count. Very good. Yeah, no, she's just, you don't even have to attack with her. Just generates more and more gnomes. If you have 1 other attacker, gnome will keep going on its own. All right, up next, Quintorius Kond. Look at him! What a beautiful planeswalker. Really cool card. So the floor of a 5 is, the plus is incredibly powerful. So playing a 5 power, 5 loyalty planeswalker that makes a 3/2 every turn for the rest of the game, incredibly difficult to beat. Like, if you make a 3/2, get it up to 5 loyalty, your opponent attacks you with just a 4/4, they can punch it down again. But if they more likely attack it with 2/3/3, you can trade your 3/2 with their 3/3 and make another one. In a pinch, if they can attack it right away, just play it and discover. Not ideal, but discover 4, your opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, just happy to hit. You're also very likely to get to the, because it's 5 loyalty the turn it comes down, and it goes to 6 loyalty the next turn. That is a Planeswalker ult in turns with 2 blockers. Very powerful one. Good Planeswalker in general. That ceiling of an 8, that's if you are discovering and you can put out other creatures to defend it. Oh, I need to see the alt art. One sec. I haven't looked at any alt art yet. Midorius was one of my favorite Strixhaven cards. Oh, he's beautiful! We are changing our... We're changing the slide. This is now Quintorius Con. Beautiful. All right. Oh, I love this. All right. Next, Gishath, Sun's Avatar. 8 mana, 7/6, Vigilance, Trample, Haste. Yes, it can draw you some cards, but like if you're hitting them, they're probably about to lose anyway. Just a solid finisher. I like it a lot more than the 12/12 Galta. Is actually a little easier to cast than the 12/12 Galta. But it is an equally strong reanimation target. Very, like, it's still difficult to pay 8 mana into some format. But you want your 8 mana card to win you the game, and this does that eventually. It's just a little fragile. I gave it a 5 with a floor of 4 and a ceiling of 7. I'm actually dropping the floor to a 3. Costs 8 mana, and I keep doing that, which is why I had a 4. But solid without being amazing. Hang on. I'm missing something. I'm missing. Simic. I didn't have a Simic rare. Why isn't there a Simic rare? I lost to someone who cloned. Yes, okay. Yeah, someone cloned that. Well, I beat them, but they cloned a Galta. Thank you. All right, so we're just gonna do a live review of this one at the end, because I did not make a slide for it, and we'll talk about it later. All right. I don't know how I missed that. It happens. Throne of the Grim Captain. So I thought about this card a lot. And the thing is, 2 mana for an artifact that mills 2 cards is relevant and powerful in a lot of decks. Is good in green-black and blue-black to send. You can make it good in black-red. You can make it good in Reanimator with any black bait. But it's really hard to make work. So the place where I think that this is going to work the best is in the Reanimate deck. Because to play this card, you need it to be good, or at least do something for you before you craft. Like, you need to get more out of the mill than just trying to get to the point where you can craft. So I gave it a floor of a 1 with a ceiling of a 9, which I think I had Forced Fruition at the same score in the last set. So you have to build around it aggressively. But if you're a green-black Reanimator deck, then you have access to Merfolk, Vampires, only 1 pirate. So you'll have to splash a pirate. And then if you're green-black Reanimator, then there is only 1 black pirate, but everything else you have in those colors. If you're green-black in general, then you have access to everything. But the pirate ends up being the difficult. So I think the freebooter, the 1 mana 1/1 that dies into a treasure is what you need. I think the craft is doable. Like, the thing is really difficult, but it has hexproof. Like, a meta's Trample Lifelink hexproof cannot be raised, cannot be killed by single target removal. It can be blocked with a Death Toucher, but your opponent has to sack a permanent every attack, and if they kill it after you, like, if this gains you 14 life and casts 2 spells, you're gonna win the game anyway. I think that this is doable. I don't even think it's like that hard as long as you are conscious of things. Like, we saw so many different card types. Like, if we go to like, let's black, if we go to the black commons and uncommons, there's a lot of cards that are like really close and help us with these requirements. Like, the card I was thinking of is 3D Freebooter. This card is almost good. It's really close to being good enough, but that is enough for me to, like, I will play this in the deck with my Throne of the Grim Cap. So I almost feel like they gave this to us. They made this a pirate specifically for Throne of the Grim Captain. I think it is a green-black card. Like, you can make it work in blue-black, but then the dinosaur gets. So if you're blue-black Reanimator with Descent cards, then you can run some off-color dinosaurs. But, like, there are land cycling dinosaurs. The white, black, blue, and green land cycler. Oh, all 5 land cyclers are dinosaurs. So, like, the dinosaur is almost free. Blue and green both have a lot of merfolk. So you need access to blue or green. Pirates, there's one black one. There's plenty of blue and red ones. Vampires are the hardest one, but the vampires are all good enough that if you have one, you're happy to play it anyway. They're only black and white. So I think black, green, or black, blue are the best ones for making this happen. I mean, that's not because it's the, I mean, you can get all those creature types, but it's because that tap to mill to is artifact. So yeah, I am really excited to make this happen. If this is in my pack, I will take it. Okay. Chimil, the Inner Sun. This card's pretty bad. I know it looks good, and you see Discover 5, and you're like, cool. But chances are it's not going to discover a 5-mana spell. It's going to discover a 3 or a 4-mana spell, which means that this is essentially a 6-mana spell that draws you an extra card every turn. Yes, it saves you some mana, but by the time you can cast this, it's not going to matter that it's saving you that much. And a 6-mana draw an extra card each turn would be good enough if other people's 6-mana card advantage plays weren't dropping massive threats onto the board, and other people couldn't kill artifacts easily. 6 mana is too much mana to pay for an artifact that doesn't replace itself all the time. Yeah, but was it Troy? Were they winning because they had the Chimil, the Inner Sun in play, or are they winning because they were drawing an extra card every turn on an otherwise parodied board? Like, the thing is, this does win you the game eventually, but there are just better things to do with 6 mana. So, like, compare this to, so Chimil, the Inner Sun versus, like, I would much rather play, where are you? Here we go. I would much rather play Inverted Iceberg because it's 2 mana and it replaces itself right away. The artifact, when I need it, is relevant earlier, but then I don't have to put a clunky 6 mana artifact in my deck to spend 6 mana on a powerful spell. So, like, this card does draw you a card every turn, but there are better engines. You'll have to play, like, I had this in my pre-release pool. I sided it in twice against very grindy decks. But, like, blue-black does not have good ways to deal with artifacts, and they tend to grind. So I like it against blue. But, like, red is going to be playing all of their braids, green is going to be playing all of their disenchants, white is going to be playing all of their deconstruction hammers. You can't spend 6 mana on your engine if it doesn't win you the game. So, like, this drawing you an extra card every turn is relevant, but there are better ways to get an extra card every turn at rare. I don't think the spells you control can't be countered a bit is going to be relevant very often. Prove me wrong, but generally, because the counter spells are good in this set. Like, only one color gets to play them, and they have to be very heavy blue. Counter spells. So, like, if you're a Discover deck, you can play it. but there's only one card that rewards Discover, and I do like that line. Like the 4-mana 3/3 that doubles your Discover into Chimil, I like that, but it's still got the same problem of being a fragile 6-mana artifact that if you draw a card and your opponent braids this, you're gonna be upset. Not a fan. Just not that. Batlazantli, the Great Door. Very good card. It's a lot like this Throne in that you want it to be in a deck that wants to loot. Like looting for no mana is incredibly powerful in Magic in general, even without having access to spend stuff. Sure thing, Troy, but it doesn't just die to removal. It dies to removal that your opponent already has, and you can play versions of this that are less fragile. So like if there were no other way to draw an extra card each turn, then I might be interested. But it doesn't do that. Like, or if you could control which spell were on top, if you had a lot of the scries and ways to keep yourself from scrying into a 1-mana spell, like running this card makes it harder to run counter spells, it makes it harder to run pump spells. I'm not a fan. I love this card. So like it loots until you're done looting. So the way this card will usually play is you get to trigger your Descend a few times, dump relevant cards in your graveyard, and then eventually, once your hand is all set up, you get to flip it into the core and cast all the spells you've been saving up in your hand. Solid card. It enables a lot of different strategies. I'm actually rate. The floor needs to be higher. I don't mind this rate. Yeah, it's almost always going to play near that floor before because looting is so. 3 mana is a lot to pay for a card that just loots. Yeah, that's right. I like that. I like it. I think it's a cool card. Making all this mana late in the game, like this is a better version of the Growing Rise of Itlimoc, I think, as it does more early, and it is an artifact. Being an artifact is huge. Being an artifact over an enchantment is huge. All right, Roaming Throne, 4-mana 4/4 with Ward 2 would be good enough on its own. Generally speaking, the Roaming Throne will duplicate one triggered ability, right? So you don't necessarily play this in a tribal deck. Like you can play this in a Merfolk deck, and a Merfolk and lots of Merfolk explore or make maps. But I think it does better as a 4-mana 4/4 that lets you duplicate the next triggered ability on purpose from your hand. So if you cast this on turn 4 and you have like the Chupacabra Echo, and you can give 2 creatures mine. That will feel very powerful. Or if you can copy, like I tried really hard to copy the 6-mana 6/6 that each player sacrifices 2 creatures just for fun. It's not that good. But yeah, what you don't take like a 4-mana 4/4 with Ward 2 that duplicates one triggered ability. Way to think of it. If you can get a full tribal deck, go for it. But I think it's going to be very difficult. So that's the ceiling of a 7. This floor of a 5 is one duplicated spell, one duplicated trigger. Oh, yep. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Troy. Like, there's not a ton of dinosaurs with triggered abilities that you care about duplicating. That one is so powerful. And you'll have situations where it's like, you have to, like, a green-black deck will play the Dreadmaw, they'll play the Chupacabra Echo, and you'll pick the one that's more relevant. Tarian's Soul Cleaver. This card has really overperformed. So it is a 1-mana artifact, and it grows every time any player's artifact or creature. So that includes maps, that includes treasures, that includes all creatures. Those best in the black-white sacrifice deck. That's where it's got that ceiling of a 7. But you can assemble good things to do with it in any deck. It's not the best late-game top deck, but like often you'll be fine. Like playing this out and equipping it to a flyer suddenly means you're okay trading your 3/3 dinos for their 3/3 dinos, or your 1/1 death touches for their 1/1 death. You can find things to do with this card in most color combos because treasure is growing your creature. And being a 1-mana artifact is also valuable in this. Just having a 1-mana artifact that feeds your other artifact strategies is... Oh man, so I got to do this in Two-Headed Giant, where my partner put this on his pirate sirens, the 1/2s with vigilance, he just goes turn 1 Soul Cleaver, turn 2 Siren, turn 3 Equip, and I ate all my creatures with my Presidio, just to grow his creatures at instant speed. So powerful. Up next, we have the Millennium Calendar. Love this card. It's really bad. Like the problem with the Millennium Calendar, so you got to see me kill someone with it on stream. Very happy about that. Was the first person to do it, and that's going to be a point of pride. You're going to hear me say that a lot. I was the first person to get a kill with Millennium Calendar, and I did it before the constructed play. You can get it's 7 activations. Oh my god, I think that's one of my very favorite moments in any early access, and there's a lot of contenders. But I got to kill someone with this card in early access by activating the Soul Ring card and doubling the trigger, doubling the activation. But the problem with this card is it takes 7 turns, which is also 14 mana, and your opponent can kill it when it has 500 counters on it. Like, it's 7 turns and your opponent knows it's coming. I got to kill someone with this, and then they killed it. Yeah. Feeling of 3 is pay 14 mana over 7 turns to win the game. Like, there are other ways you can pay 14 mana over 7 turns. But the problem is, you can pay in 12 mana, and then your opponent gets to abrade it, and you did nothing. I'm sad about it. I actually I'm way higher on the blue one. I went way higher on, like, I think that this card is actually playable situationally. I don't think the Millennium Calendar is. Alright, up next, Threefold Thunderhulk. Card's just very good. It's a bomb you can put in any color. It's not... I should probably... because, like, you do take... Like, it doesn't go into every deck, but it goes into every deck that is likely to be able to cast it. Like, making 3 gnomes when it comes down, and then 3 gnomes when it attacks, is very good. I actually lost a game of Two-Headed Giant to this card, but only because... This is my own fault. I did not feel like waiting for a judge, because... but yes, very powerful, like 7 mana for 6 power that grows, that makes 3 gnomes every turn is pretty good. I like it. I did show you it worked, so we're going to hang on. This is my very first game from early access. If you haven't watched the clip yet, humor me. I was so happy when it worked. But yes, we are. I'm sorry to show you it worked, because the thing is, Hatter, the next 2 games it died at 500 counters. They waited until it got to 500 counters, and then they killed it. Counter lethal's a thing. It's 7 turns, but it's a thing. Sometimes you do just get to do nothing for 7 turns. Sometimes you fight for 7 turns. Soul Ring to activate it. Alright, up next, Treasure Map. You always play this card in a controlling deck. It is worth 3 cards, and can accelerate your mana. It's just not great in the mid-range deck, or in the aggro decks. Like, you play this when you have spare mana sometimes, and it's better if you can make more treasures. Really good as a piece of card advantage, and as an engine, if you have the right deck for it. I love new treasure. Yes. So, like, if you aren't an aggressive deck, you play the treasure map. But making 3 treasures all at the same time is very good. And the scry one is relevant. Like, getting to scry for your draws is very good. So, it's not free, but I gave it a 5 because I like it, and you'll usually end up playing it. It's only the most aggressive decks that don't want it. And if you can, that ceiling of a 7, that's if you're making more treasures after. Thing is, a lot of the decks that make more treasures end up being fairly aggressive. So mid-range pirates deck, so that's where it shines. Yeah, but you don't have spare mana in aggro Troy, and you don't have spare time on turn 2. So, like, the thing is, it ends up being awkward in an aggro deck. So, like, it's still good in some aggro decks. I'm not going to say blanket ban on aggro. It's good in the aggro decks where you, in this format, so, like, when we looked at, like, white cards, so if we go over to white aggressive decks, the white aggressive decks care very much about curving out because their cards will grow their other cards as long as they can deploy them on curve. So when the treasure map plays into that curve, maybe because of a Guardian of the Great Door, then it's a little bit better. But when you're trying to win on turn 5 because you deployed a creature every turn to top out at the Malamet War Scribe, then it's a lot worse. But if you have a treasure map that, like, maybe your turn 5 want it to be stable a creature with Petrify, treasure map, Scry, then it's a lot better. And drawing cards is really good. It also, like, the reason it's not that you don't play it in the aggro deck, it's just a lot worse because the card is powerful. So yeah, it's great when you can sacrifice 3 treasures to the treasure cove over time and draw 3 cards. That 3 cards over a period of 6 turns. And that's good, but you don't want 6 turns to pass in the aggro deck. What you want to do with the treasure map is use the treasures. Like, my favorite thing to do with the treasure map is to scry 3, then use the 2 mana to cast a spell that turn because it basically ramps you, and then you can draw a card with the next turn. Right, it's great in Terry and Soul Cleaver. There's lots of niche cases where you get to go higher than this 5, but overall it's not free. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. You don't cram this into any deck, but, like, there's lots of decks where you want that extra value. Like the floor of a 3, that's playable. It's always playable, but it's not something that you will. Art, they're drawing it out. They find it. Yeah, I love treasure. I rarely play decks aggressive enough. So one of the cool things about treasure map is over time you're paying in 3 mana to scry 1 3 times, but then you get 3 treasures back. So you're banking that mana, but you don't need to bank. You don't want to be banking that mana in an aggressive deck. You can't have a 2-drop that doesn't attack in it. Yes, that's why I like it in mid-range and control decks so much more. Like, so mid-range and control, mid-range is going to be a 7, control is going to be a 5 to 7 around it, and aggro is going to be a 3 or a 4. But you can still play it. All right, that is it for the artifacts. All we have left are the lands, which I'm looking forward to. So unlike a lot of cycles, all of these lands are pretty different. The Restless Anchorage I gave a 6 with a floor of 5, ceiling of 7, low effort, because it's just low risk. So if we jump over to, like, the black-red one, that one gains Menace, but flying makes it so much easier to attack and generate that map. You can start, like, so if we go back to, like, the last set where we had the blue-red one, I was not happy attacking on turn 3 to try to, but I will often be happy attacking on turn 4 to make a map. Maps are relevant and important to blue-white. You can use the maps for the city itself to explore. Really powerful card. I'm not usually going to splash colors to activate it, but I will use it as a dual land to splash blue or white. Restless Reef I gave a 6, very similar rating, slightly different effort. So this card is one of the only ways to aggressively mill someone in the Yeah, it's really good, Troy. And, like, you'll make a map sometimes just to get this up to a 3/4 to block your opponent and stop attacking. You have to block. But the Restless Reef 4/4 Death Touch. This will always trade with a card. Your opponent has a 7/7 or an 8/8. It will still trade with it. This is a land that will always be worth a card that you can always sacrifice to draw a card. Not draw a card, but deal with something. The Death Touch is relevant. The mill is relevant because if you lock down the game hard enough in blue-black, you will be able to mill your opponent out with this card. Games can happen where your opponent is spending a lot. They're milling themselves, finish them off. Or sometimes you just want to attack on turn 5 with this, turn on Descend all at once, up to 4 or 8. It is also a shark. The card is just very powerful. I gave it a 6, floor of 5, ceiling of 7. Up next is the black-red one, Restless Vents. I think this is the worst one just because, like, if you're attacking on turn 4 with a 2/3 menace, you get to rummage, but your opponent will likely have 2/2s to block with. Also, in this set specifically, there's a lot of 2/3s, so your opponent's very likely to be able to block this at no effort. And if you wait until the extreme late game, it doesn't hit hard enough to be a relevant card. So what you care about is pitching the land you just drew, get a real card, but it's going to be difficult to cast that card in the same turn when you just had to spend 4 mana to attack. So, I mean, it's still a solid card because it's a dual land that turns into a creature. That's worth a 4 always. I'm gonna raise it up. It's very hard to get it up to that ceiling of a 6. I'm actually gonna take effort up. But like, it's still solid. Like, you'll still play this in a black-red deck. But like, I might take a different sort of fixing though. Yeah. Well, this next one's really good. Restless Ridgeline. So I gave it a 6. It's the easiest one to play with because green and red are both very good at splashing for them. Like, you can play this in red and use the treasure to turn it into a 5/4. So it's a 3/4 dinosaur, but it's 5 power when it attacks if you have. So red treasure to turn it into a creature. Green. Fixing that green has to turn it. So like, I will take this card if I am red or if I am green. Play it as a living. Very strong. Also relevant typing. It is a dinosaur. If you, I know red green likes dinosaurs. And then the last of the living land is Restless Prairie. Yes, it's a llama. Look at this llama. It's beautiful. All right, so this one is incredibly good because one of the things that you have to balance a lot, play a green white go wide deck, is how many ways you have to grow all of your creatures versus how many creatures you have. It solves that problem. You play on turn 1, you play a bunch of creatures, and then on turn 5, this is Anthem built in. You will have a lot of wins with this card. When your opponent has a Restless Prairie out, start doing the math every turn for if they attack with it. It will be worth, like, this hits hard on its own, hits harder with a lot of other creatures, and messes up your opponent's math. Like, having a Restless Prairie in play will make it so difficult for your opponent. Blocks off, and just setting up for it. So many games. Alright, last 3 cards. Cavern of Souls. Bad card in limited, but you still draft it because it's worth $40. We can talk about why in a minute. And then okay, so dinosaurs can play this card, but you're never happy about playing. A few weird, like, off-color creature types might be able to make it work with humans. And you can side it in against blue decks if you're worried about your spells being countered. It just doesn't do quite enough. You can play it as bad fixing if you really are a dedicated tribal. So dinosaurs can play it. They have enough dinosaurs. Or if you end up like first picking a merfolk rare or a vampire rare, you can make it work. But it's tough to make that work. And even then, like, if I end up being vampires, I'm not going to pick the Cavern of Souls over a black-white vampire. So, a little sad that it's not great and limited, but financially, you should definitely still take this card. I think that this is the only card in this set that I think is about to come up in price. Every other card in this set is about where it should be, or fall. But yes, I think Cavern of Souls is going to increase in price from where it is now. I'll tell you why if you care. All right, I'm next. Echoing Deeps. Cave, good in the cave and the cave deck, bad everywhere else. Good if you have these rare lands. And attack your Restless Ridgeline out aggressively and then play it. But generally speaking, this is a Caves card. Caves rare. You don't want it unless you are a Caves deck. Unlike Sunken Citadel. Card's just Evolving Wilds, but better. Being able to choose your color is strong. You're not going to use the 2 mana ability too often, but there are hidden lands, and it makes all your hidden lands a little bit better. So in the Caves deck, this is a straight up 7. I think it's very, very good in the dedicated Caves deck. Otherwise, I think that it's just going to be an Evolving Wilds at a happy with that. But like, having this lets you take a Restless Ridgeline or a Restless Vents or a Restless Reef that may have gone a little bit later. It makes the cards a little bit stronger. All right, so the last card we're going to do is the one we are missing. All right, so, hey, let's talk this one out because I haven't thought about it. your worst case scenario here, a 4-mana 4/4 that explores every turn. So that's good. Like a 4-mana 4/4 that explored, that's a 5. So we're gonna start there. And clone a creature, but you can't copy a legendary creature. How good is a clone that changes every turn, but only on offense? I think that's pretty good. You have good creatures to copy. Take a look at our rares somewhere. Lots of good legendaries. Find an angel would be good. Oh, let's jump to the. Whereas Larcenous is fine. Nothing crazy. Copying gods is nice. Nothing great to copy in the blue rares. But like, if you can just find something bigger than it, you're pretty happy. I mean, Galta is a lot of work. Quatli is a lot of work. Raptor's a good thing to copy. But like, you don't want to copy the Spelunker. Copying the God is probably going to win you the game, but the God does that anyway. Copying the Hammer Skull is nice, but it still stuns. Copying the Sentinel is really... There's nothing crazy game-winning. Which means that it's not going to be that much higher. Like, just growing it. Becoming something with a 5/5 or a 6/6 that comes down the turn after. So, I think it's a lot of work. But if you are the Explore deck, then this is a repeatable source. So let's set it to a 6. Have it at a 7 because that would be an Explore deck plus additional things. It's not that hard to have either of the Explore or be something. We did do that one out of order because I just missed it in my slides when I did that review. All right, so that is going to be it for today's Rare and Mythic set review. That is all of them. We have finished the set review. If you are interested in any of those, you can go ahead and check out the VODs or go over to YouTube where they've been edited down a little. I will get them edited down more as soon as I am able. But the next thing I'm going to be doing is my advanced draft primer. That's going to be a deeper look. So like if you go online and search a draft primer or how to draft Lost Cabins of Ixalan, you will find good things. People are good at this. But they tend to tell you more of the basics, like draft artifacts. But this is how craft works. So I'll be giving you more advanced tips. My article will include things like what percentage of removal kills what, how good is the card, and advanced draft pathing, ways to get through your draft, ways to change your pick order based on. Keep an eye out for that. I'm going to try and get it out next week, starting tomorrow.